And good day, good evening, ladies and gents, depending where you are around the world. This might be a short stream because I don't seem to have any guests at all on tonight, but we'll see what's happening. I'm going to do what I usually do and start us off with a bit of a tune.
Again, let the waters roar, Jack, safe and sound at home again. Let the waters roar, Jack, long we've tossed on the rolling main, now we're safe ashore, Jack. Don't forget your old shipmate, rolly, 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 ride-o. Since we sailed from Plymouth Sound 4 years gone or nigh, Jack, was there ever chummies now, such as you and I, Jack? Long we've tossed on the rolling main, now we're safe ashore, Jack. Don't forget your old shipmate, folly, rolly, 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 ride-o. We have worked the self-same gun, quarter-deck division, sponger I and loader you, through the whole commission. Long we've tossed on the rolling main, now we're safe ashore, Jack. Don't forget your old shipmate, folly, rolly, 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 ride-o. Oftentimes if we laid out, toil, no danger, fearing, tugging out the flapping sail to the weather rearing. Long we've tossed on the rolling main, now we're safe ashore, Jack. Don't forget your old shipmate, folly, rolly, 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 ride-o. When the middle watch was on and the time went slow, boy, who could choose a rousing stave? Who like Jack or Joe, boy? Long we've tossed on the rolling main, now we're safe ashore, Jack. Don't forget your old shipmate, folly, rolly, 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 ride-o. There she swings an empty hulk, not a soul below now. Number 7, starboard mess, Mrs. Jack and Joe now. Long we've tossed on the rolling main, now we're safe ashore, Jack. Don't forget your old shipmate, folly, rolly, 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 ride-o. But the best of friends must part, fair or foul the weather, hand your flipper for a shake, now a drink together. Long we've tossed on the rolling main, now we're safe ashore, Jack. Don't forget your old shipmate, folly, rolly, 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 ride-o. Long we've tossed on the rolling main, now we're safe ashore, Jack. Don't forget your old shipmate, folly, rolly, 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 ride-o.
Okay, don't forget your old shipmates, who's a traditional Royal Navy song. And if anyone's seen the excellent movie Master and Commander from 2003, it's sung in that, I do believe. This might be a pretty short stream because I don't have any guests at the moment, but anyway, we'll see what happens. What do I want to talk about this? Well, I mean, the first thing, obviously, is that apparently half of the UK has been vaccinated for the China virus. And yet, all the signals that all the mainstream media is putting out is that no one is going to be allowed to go abroad for summer holidays in any case. And what they seem to have done is they put out all this Wait a minute. Royal Oak, I'd do that, but I don't know if I've got your email address. Have I got your email address? If I have, then I'll send it to you. But yeah, apparently what they did was they put out this stuff that people should get vaccinated because then they can go for their summer holes. And half the country, half the adults in the country did get vaccinated in the UK. And then lo and behold, now they're saying, no, you won't be able to do that anyway. And half of Europe itself is now locking down. And the Europeans are blaming the British version of the virus. And the British are blaming the European versions of the virus. It's just utterly ridiculous, quite frankly. It really is. Okay. 1 second, guys. I just need to check something. Where are we? Do I have all that email? So, okay. Adaman, how you going, mate?
All right, sorry, mate.
No, that's cool. No worries, no worries. I was just trying to see if I had Raw Oak's email. I don't think I do because he wants to come on. If you've got a link to him, you can certainly chuck in the link if you've got it.
Yeah, hang on.
I don't think I've got his email. I was just trying to check on that. Sorry, guys, we're having a few sorting out things today. I actually haven't. Normally I start setting this stuff up a bit earlier, but I haven't done so at the moment. Grief in the chat. There is no number 13. I think the British people have had enough bad luck since about 1914 that we don't need a number 13 stream of this one. Thank you very much. And I also worked at sea on 3 different jobs, and sailors are very superstitious, and I kind of got that. Like one of the things sailors used to do in the old days, I'm just filling in some time here, guys, is that they would get a pig tattooed on their foot. And the reason for that was that pigs are very, very good swimmers. They don't tend to drown much. So it was considered bad luck. So and even modern sailors are extremely superstitious. Like I have had on 2 boats, I should say. We were going to go to sea, and the skipper wouldn't do it because it was Friday the 13th, and that happened to me twice. And he said, no, we're going to go on the 14th, on Saturday. Don't shoot an albatross. Yes, that's another one I've certainly heard. But, you know, if you think about how dangerous it was working at sea, particularly in the age of sail, it's perfectly understandable why these guys were so superstitious. And so, yeah, there is no Splendid Isolation number 13, and nor will there be if I've got anything to do with it. How you going, Warlock?
Hello. Yes, thanks for chucking me the link, Ataman. It's good to see. Hello, chat. Hello, everyone. Been a good week, I think. I guess I don't know. I don't know what to say. I've forgotten what you say on these things. I haven't been on 37 stream in a bit. So
well, this is not really a 37 stream. We're kind of our own thing. We're kind of our own thing. Yeah, we are kind of our own thing. We're certainly not a 14 stream, but we're not really a 37 stream either. Although I know people who are 37 who I like for sure. But yeah. But I was just talking to start with about the way that holidays were waved in front of the British people as a reason to get this not properly tested vaccine, and half of them apparently have, and now all the signaling from all the mainstream media, etc., is that actually you're not going to be allowed to go on holiday anyway. So
yeah, no, I mean, my grandparents have, I think both of them have had both jabs, and I think my mum has had one jab, and she still can't go over there for my grandfather's birthday. So I mean, one question is what the general point is, and it's unclear whether or not it gives you any immunity anyway, of course. So
yeah, absolutely. Adam, what do you think about that stuff?
Yeah, it seems. I did notice that like very recently they're now talking about like the possibility of a third wave in Europe and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, here we go.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the 5th wave, the 6th wave, the 9th wave. I don't think that we're ever going back to normal. I really don't. I just don't see it. And all this time, you know, more and more businesses are going bankrupt, particularly small businesses, of course, which give people independence and employ people that are independent. It's just a disaster as far as I can see, and it's beyond. You know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but you know. Grief, I used to live in Bognor Regis, believe it or not, a long time ago. It ain't the worst place in Britain, but it's not the best either. But yeah, I don't know, man. I just think that there's more going on here than a not very deadly virus, to be honest.
Mm.
And it's amazing how flu cases have completely disappeared in Britain and Australia and America, for example.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know, guys. I don't. Okay, well, I'm going to do what I normally do, and I'm going to ask Adam first because I asked him a couple of weeks ago, and then he got interrupted and forgot what he was going to talk about. So I'm going to ask Adam first, and then I'll ask Loke. What's the first thing you want to bring up this week, or any particular thing you want to bring up, Adam?
Oh, did we talk about the Meghan and Harry interview last week? We did, didn't we?
Yeah, we did touch on it.
Right. Okay. Has anyone seen this?
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still not quite
What
sure
is it? What is it, Adam?
I kind of feel like they're trying to like memory hold this story very quickly now. I don't know. It just seems to have disappeared off the face of the earth.
Like, yeah, I don't think they got a good reaction. They didn't get a good reaction to it, did they?
But they got enough of a reaction, surely. I mean, they've proven time and time again they don't need that much. They'll work with whatever they can get, and they'll just push whatever they want through the door. And this time, nothing.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I guess I think if you look at polling, I think the polling was still on the side of our Liz and you know the royal family in general. So I think the appeal of Meghan Markle was like, I don't know, he's minus 17 in terms of opinion polling. But so yeah, you're probably right. You know, if you want to go full Cicero and try and assign conspiracy to the news, then you could say they pulled it out deliberately. But yeah.
I just think most people were against Markle and Harry. You know, I mean, Harry is just so cucked now; it's unbelievable. And Meghan Markle, though, I mean, they're sitting in this enormous villa with like 2 swimming pools and all the rest of it, and trying to tell average people that somehow or another they're discriminated against. It's just, you know.
I didn't realize. Yeah, I didn't realize how old they both were, because I think Meghan Markle's either 38 or 39. I think Harry's in his mid-30s as well. I thought they were quite a bit younger than that, based on how they've behaved, certainly. But I mean, they're quite old. I mean, they're very late to be having kids as well, at 34 and 30. I mean, my mum had me at 39, but It's quite late to be. Yeah.
Meghan Markle is a second-rate actress who had been around the block a few times before she married Harry. So I mean,
I don't. She doesn't have any kids, does she? Archer, the little Tiddler royal was her first kid, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think she'd been doing, in inverted commas, her career prior to that as a second-rate actress. So
Did you guys see? I didn't actually think this is real when I first heard it, and I've just looked it up. That they set up a fundraiser page for to pay off the mortgage for their mansion.
Oh, what? God, goodness gracious.
And
when someone said that to me, I thought, there's no way that's true. But
it'll get it funded as well. It wouldn't surprise me.
Well, they closed it because it only raised £78. It says here.
I'm surprised it even raised that. So it's a wonder they didn't ask. It's a wonder they didn't ask billionaire Oprah Winfrey to do it for them. But I mean, there are photographs of that mansion all over the internet. So it's an enormous place. It's got huge gardens, 2 swimming pools, and statues. It's the kind. If it was in the UK, it'd be called a stately home, pretty much.
Yeah. I think you can. Jig. I think you can get rid of the thing of me saying chuck the StreamYard if you want now. I think I've been here for about 15
minutes. Sorry, I wasn't even looking. Guys.
Oh no, that's the staple of the show. It's got to stay up there for the rest.
Yeah, it's an important comment based on what we're discussing.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's really strange. What am I going to put up? Okay, we'll put that up. There you go. Okay, so someone is getting like an echo back from me.
Oh, sorry, I think I've got on a bit loud. Probably my phone.
Yeah. You need to wear headphones. But yeah, what I was going to say is, Roy, like something in particular you want to bring up?
Well, there was a protest today, wasn't there?
Yes, I was going to talk about that, but go on.
I've not seen too much about it. I know David Curtin was there and a few other people were there, but Lawrence Fox, he's doing his run for London Parliament, isn't he? I think I don't know. There's all these everyone seems to want to run for Hartlepool or London Mayor and get 2% of the vote. Apparently, it's one of the trends we're seeing. I mean, it looks to me, and based on polling, Sadiq Khan's likely going to win it in the first round. There's going to be 15 candidates getting 1 or 2%. Sean Bailey as well. He's polling terribly. He's getting 24, 25% or something like that. There's no way there's going to be a Tory mayor of London anytime soon. Obviously, the Lib Dems and Greens aren't going to win anything. So, I mean,
if I lived in London still, I mean, I was born in London, and if I still lived in London, I would probably vote for Fox. Actually, just on the basis that I'd vote for Fox, just on the basis that this channel, my channels, my advice to all British people is always: don't vote Labour, don't vote Conservative, don't vote Lib Dem, don't vote Greens, obviously. Vote for any nationalist or populist party that is well supported in your area.
Well,
yeah, doesn't make any sense.
Well, I'm not sure if I totally agree with that. There is a line of thought that you should just try and vote as right wing as possible and just try and force the discourse to the right. But I think in actuality, the Labour Party is at the moment much more damaging than the Conservatives. Right, so I can understand why.
50%.
Well, I mean, I can understand that, but to be fair, my local Labour MP, anything to get rid of him, I'd do. Seriously.
Yeah, no, listen, I certainly don't support Labour, but I don't support the Conservatives either because they don't conserve anything. In my opinion, is there hasn't been a conservative prime minister, a real conservative prime minister, at least since Margaret Thatcher, and actually, you could probably say Lord Salisbury.
Would you have voted for Jacob Rees-Mogg for MP if he was your candidate?
For MP or for prime minister?
For if you lived in North East Somerset, or I think that's his constituency.
At one stage I would have done. At one stage, I was a big fan of Jacob Rees-Mogg until I wasn't, because of what he's said and done, or not said and done more often. I used to be a big fan, 3 years ago. I was quite a big fan of Jacob Rees-Mogg, but I just don't think he's performed, basically.
Well, I think there's 2 or 3 Conservative MPs whose views might align with me or other people on certain topics who I think it would be worthwhile to vote for. I think there's Andrew something who used to be in the Monday Club, possibly John Redwood, possibly Jacob Rees-Mogg, possibly I think it's Andrew Davies is his name. Another one, but I think is you're not wanting to vote for them based on the party affiliation or just based on his personal actions or beliefs or whatever.
It's mainly the party affiliation. I just think the Conservatives are just about, well, Conservatives in inverted commas are just about beyond salvation now. I mean, there are a number of real Conservative MPs who are actually Conservative in the Conservative Party. I very much doubt if it's 24. Very much doubt if it's as
yeah.
many
Well,
as
I probably won't vote for the Conservatives because they've thrown one of my friends under the bus over the last week. But I probably would vote Reform, to be honest. So
yeah, I mean, I think Reform is definitely someone you could vote for. I think for Britain there's another party, Anne-Marie Waters' party. I think they're another one you could vote for. I think UKIP, if they actually are running anywhere these days, UKIP, I'd vote for them. Like I say, my advice to people in the UK now is just simply don't vote for the major parties or the Greens, and you've just got to vote for any almost populist or semi-nationalist party, because there are no real nationalist parties in the UK, of course. So,
well, yeah, I did vote Conservative in 2019, and that was because I knew the Conservative candidate. And I think I knocked on doors for her as well for a couple of days, and I've been in her office. So I did vote for her. I don't think she's not particularly conservative. She's fairly socially conservative, but yeah, I did vote for her. But
what's your views on this, Adam?
Well, I was going to ask you, would you vote for Michael Gove, Duke? Bearing in mind the bookshelf and the fact that he was possibly friends with Bowden, or, well, maybe friends is a stretch, but he knew him well.
Yeah, listen, my opinion of Michael Gove collapsed at the time of when Theresa May took over, when he stabbed Johnson in the back. Now, I don't like Johnson at all. Don't get me wrong. Alexander Johnson, I don't think he's a Conservative at all. But my opinion of Gove absolutely collapsed. And part of the reason for that is, from what I could work out, his reason for stabbing Johnson in the back at the time was mainly because his wife told him to. So, and I don't really respect any man who does what his wife tells him to. So, I just don't,
But don't you also kind of think that maybe there's an opportunity to relight the heroic will in him, if there ever was one?
Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
No, Michael Gove.
Oh no, sorry, Michael Gove. Well, I think people have brought up before that Bowden used to know Michael Gove, but
yeah.
I don't know. I think Michael Gove is fair weather. Like if there was like a shift to the right, then he might jump along. But yeah, I mean,
but just giving him easy votes probably isn't going to do that either, which is a shame.
No, but I don't know. I think to be honest, the Labour Party in this country, like it wouldn't. They're going to lose Hartlepool. It looks like. So they're going to lose another seat. The Conservatives are going to gain one, and it's not like the Conservatives are particularly popular at the moment. So I don't think the Labour Party, they're just nowhere near it at the moment. They can't. They've never won an election and not won a majority in Scotland. That's never happened. And at the moment, I think they're sat on 1 out of 56, and it's possible they could lose that. So they could have no seats at all in Scotland, and they need a majority in order to get into Westminster.
Well, I mean, there's like Scotland is another interesting situation at the moment, because it looks like the SNP are on the downward slide now. I know. I was talking to Colin Liddell, who's a Scotsman, obviously, and he was saying, like, the best chance in Scotland. He's a right of centre Conservative, and he was saying the best chance for right wing people in Scotland, and to retain the union as well, which is important to me, certainly, is for an indigenous Scottish right-wing party to come up. And I know there have been some people doing efforts in that direction, because the Conservatives in Scotland are they're never going to get anywhere now. They're just... I mean, they were promoting a lesbian woman as their leader at one stage.
Yeah, she was dreadful. Ruth Davidson was dreadful. the comments she made as well. She said she wanted the UK to be more multicultural and things like that. Just absolutely appalling.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've watched George Galloway with some interest. I think he's someone that I think he's a shill. He's a shill to whoever pays him the most. But I think there has perhaps been a shift in him towards more like, I don't know, I guess you could say Nazbol. It's a bit of a meme, but you could say Nazbol style politics. He made a sort of almost ethnic comment towards, who is it? I think it was, who's the guy? Is it Hamza? What's his name? The hate crime.
Hamza.
Yeah. I know the guy you're talking about.
He says you're not a Celt.
Which he isn't, of course, but there you go.
He isn't, which is correct, yeah. But yeah, but I've watched him with some interest. I think his what's it called? It's called All for Unity. That's his organisation.
Well, I think Colin Liddell hit the nail on the head that what a right-wing party in Scotland needs to be is kind of they need to be economically a little bit left of centre, and in terms of socially, they need to be right of centre. And I think that's probably the best solution for Scotland. And my thing about Scotland is I think that Britain is stronger as a United Kingdom than it would be if it was just its separate parts, and that's obvious to anyone, really.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you want to go, I mean, empirically, or I don't know what's the other word, I've forgotten. But the more money does go over the Hadrian's Wall than comes back of it. But again, it is more of a, it's more of a, I don't know, it's something deeper than money, isn't it? I suppose trying to keep the union together, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, I think Englishmen and Scotsmen, Welshmen and Northern Irishmen together are much stronger than their separate parts.
Absolutely.
So I'm very much a unionist myself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you reckon?
It's funny
Adam?
how because politics has generally been reduced in this country to nothing but economic talk. Like the parties can just talk about tax policy and that's kind of about it. And it is kind of funny how that's even affected, like, the left. Even the SNP just talks about like taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll wave around the Scottish flag because everyone knows what they're really talking about, but ultimately they just talk about money.
But I mean, if you look at the Scot Nats and their idea of like leaving the UK but joining the EU, if the EU let them do that, which is by no means certain anyway. As Royal Oak just said, a lot more money goes from England to Scotland than comes the other way. And not only is there that, there are a lot of important British Armed Forces bases in Scotland, particularly Royal Navy. And also much of the British warship building is based in Scotland. And of course, an independent Scotland would lose all of that. And so I think it would cripple Scotland financially and economically. I just think it would destroy much of the Scottish economy.
Well, I'm certainly a novice on economics, but if you sort of look at the sort of trade that Scotland does and the sort of economic position it's in, you've got quite a lot of people, commuting from England, commuting from Scotland to England, a lot of trade going between the places, obviously, because Britain's been, a united country since I think it's 17. Oh no, how do I not know that? That's very embarrassing. 1707, 1707, wasn't it? There we go. Yeah,
very early 1700s. Yes.
Got it in one, right? I think empirically, in terms of like a day-to-day basis, other than they've got a different flag, I don't think there would really be that much economic difference. Other than, as you say, obviously there's shipbuilding and things like that. But
all the military stuff would have to move. I mean, like there are British nuclear submarine bases and stuff like Scotland. They would have to move. They couldn't be based in an independent Scotland.
Well,
absolutely impossible.
Yeah. I imagine, obviously, because of the Act of Union, technically we're equal partners. They would have to assign. Would they have to assign ships to?
No. This is the thing. Like the SNP were talking about running two former Royal Navy frigates if they got independence. Scotland couldn't afford to do that. Scotland could barely afford to run a couple of offshore patrol vessels. So another reason you can't have any British bases in Scotland is the Scots couldn't defend them on their own. Which is not to say that Scotland doesn't provide Britain with some of its best soldiers and sailors. It does. But the Scottish economy is simply not big enough to properly defend those guys.
Well, yeah, I mean, what was I going to say? Yeah, I had an argument with some Scottish nationalists, not I think it was like over a year ago, but I mean, they were on about the Aberdeen oil thing, but again, I think that year Aberdeen oil, I
Yeah.
think, literally broke even. So
Yeah, it's been running out for some time.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think and it's hardly like Scotland's going to become the Dubai of Northern Europe, is it? It's not to that size at all. But
No, it's the Scottish oil has been running out for a very long time. The next place the UK is liable to find oil is much more likely to be somewhere around the Falkland Islands or something, which I don't think the SNP could lay any claim to. But there we go. I tell you what I wanted to talk about. There was I watched a couple of channels, a couple of vaguely nationalist, patriotic channels on YouTube. We're talking about this idea of sending all these illegal migrants to Ascension Island, and which the government apparently has put up as a possibility. Now, I think it's an excellent idea. Ascension is a British island. It's a volcanic island with hardly any trees on it, in the South Atlantic Ocean, in the middle of nowhere, and the only people who live there are military guys. There's no civilians on the island, apart from a few guys who look after some seabird nests and that sort of stuff. So I reckon setting up a camp on Ascension would be an excellent idea, providing all these idiots who come across in dinghies know they're immediately going to get sent there, and they're going to stay there until they're deported. Then it would work.
I thought it was kind of good as well, because one of the things you always see is like people will constantly allude. They'll say, "Oh, we need to take a leaf out of our enlightened cousins in Germany," or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then when it came to this bill, they just said, "Oh, this is something other countries do," so we thought we'd give it a try. I thought, well, they can't, after all the rhetoric they throw out, they can't really argue with that.
Well, Australia did exactly that. They set up camps on like remote islands in the middle of nowhere, so that these guys who were arriving from Indonesia, if they weren't intercepted on the way and sent back by Australian warships, when they arrived, they were immediately sent to this island in the middle of nowhere.
They send them
which was far worse than where they came from.
They send them to the Republic of Nauru, don't they? I think it's
that's one place, but there are others. There are a number of offshore islands that the Australians use for this, and it worked. Very few of these guys even attempt to come to Australia anymore. So I think actually, I put a comment under one of these videos saying, "Yeah, damn good idea." Because this guy was saying, "Oh, this will be expensive." No, it isn't. All you got to do is put up some huts and some barbed wire around it. There's already military guys on the island who can guard it. But I mean, okay, send a few prison officers or somebody over there, and then they just stay there until they get deported. Because they're obviously not really refugees, because they're coming from France or Belgium. And France or Belgium, whilst they have their issues and their problems, they're not war zones.
No.
It's just nonsense. I mean, I would like, if I had my way, I'd like, if they were picked up by Border Force or the Navy, I'd just drop them off at the nearest French port and say, "There you go, guys." That's all I'd do. But I mean, if you're going to have to accept them for one reason or another, Ascension is British territory. It's a British overseas territory. As I say, there are no locals there who they're going to disrupt. There's just the military. It's a completely volcanic and largely sterile island. Great place to keep these guys until they can be deported back to where they came from.
What do we think about the this new protesting bill that the government's bringing in?
Oh, it's disastrous. And then some MPs are even saying so. Not many, but some. Because look at this. Actually, I wanted to get onto this because they brought it up a little while ago. There were big protests in London today, for example, about the forced lockdowns. Thousands and thousands of people attended. I've watched a few videos on it, and of course the police were there in full riot gear and all this, not in their soft caps and stuff like they do when Black Lives Matter does anything. But why should the government have rules to stop one person protesting? Because under these rules, so far as I can work out, like one person could have the wrong T-shirt on and be arrested by the police.
Yeah.
What is free about that, and how can a conservative, supposedly, government back that?
Well, I kind of like it, actually. I'll be honest.
Go on, tell me why.
Maybe an unpopular opinion, but the right doesn't protest. So you're just disempowering the left, and that's kind of it.
I mean,
well, some of the people today protesting about forced lockdowns were right-wing people for sure. Not all of them, but some of them were.
Yeah, sure, but I mean, if you just have to, I mean, the thing is as well, like protesting doesn't actually help unless you're sort of what's the phrase, like pushing on an open door.
Mm.
And so
True.
right-wing protests. I mean, you can look at the March for Life in America, right? It's the if you were to talk about marches that happen every year annually, it's the biggest, as far as I'm aware, it's the biggest march,
Yeah.
and yet it's achieved nothing. So
Fair enough.
if you can take away that tool that the media use for their manufactured consent, I don't really see why that's particularly a bad thing. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
rather not have to, but you know, if it works, it works.
Yeah, well, I think obviously over here we have the example of the Iraq War March, was I think 1.2 million people, something like that, showed up for. It didn't make a lick of difference, of course.
No.
I think Punk Bastardo brought up the EDL in the chat. Obviously, that didn't do very much, and I think there's very, very few examples. I think Joanna Lumley and the Gurkhas campaign, I think, was the only time that doing an actual protest actually made a physical difference in government policy. But again, that's a very, very minor thing. So
yeah,
I mean,
wasn't a big deal to anybody, and wasn't going against the social liberal narrative.
Yeah, well, continue on from what Ataman said. I can see where you're coming from, but like in terms of like you have to sort of look at the media reaction to these kind of protests, right? Because obviously, you know, the police have cracked down on these anti-lockdown protests pretty heavily throughout the last 6 or 7 months, right? And obviously, there was the footage of the Metropolitan Police cracking down on the Sarah Everard protesters a couple of weeks ago. I think it was last week. And obviously, you know, that gets to the news. And then I think there was this video that I think my sister showed it to me of these Rangers fans up in the north of Scotland, and obviously up there, like, you know, that the police are probably a little bit more hands off, right? And so they're saying, well, it's hypocritical because like the police are cracking down on Sarah Everard vigil, but they're not cracking down on these Rangers fans. Obviously, they pick on the Rangers fans because they're right wing. They didn't pick on the Liverpool fans, right? Obviously, because that's largely a left wing city. So, I mean, and again, what I'm trying to say here is that like there's a different perception because of the media and because of, like, you know, different journalists and things like that. That whatever happens, it will just be used against the right anyway. So, I mean, you can say, well, you can use these sort of, like, I don't know, what would be the word here? I guess like pragmatic, or I guess Machiavellian arguments for why protests should be banned. But again, like we're not in control of these institutions. So I mean, I think it's, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but I just think that rules like this, you know, if and when eventually there's a Labour government, I mean, I hope there never is, but if and when there is, they would just use them against people in the same way. I just generally think there shouldn't be that many rules against peaceful protests. If you break the law, fine, the cops can arrest you anyway. You know, breach of the police is a thing, and it's been a thing for a very long time. So I don't understand why they need these extra laws. I really don't. I mean, but then I don't understand why the British government can lock people in their homes for months and months and months for a not very dangerous disease either. But, you know.
Well, I don't know.
UK has not been a free country in any real sense for a very long time now, and it like makes me sad. It just does.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. People are fans of using the word like tyranny, aren't they? Like Lawrence Fox says this is tyranny, or you know, I think
to some degree it is. To be honest,
it is, but like I don't know. Again, I don't like using it because it's a bit of a loaded term. But I don't know. But obviously,
Adam, what do you think? I mean, do you not think there should be like a general right to peaceful protest?
Ideally,
and I'm not talking about blocking off traffic in the middle of London. I don't think that should be allowed because that's stopping people going about their business. But I'm talking about a peaceful protest, walking along the sidewalk or standing in the middle of a park or a square somewhere. I don't think that should be against the law.
yeah, sure, ideally, but I don't think we're living in the age for that anymore.
Yeah, well, we're living in some sort of age. 555 in the chat. The UK did not destroy Rhodesia. Let me tell you this. Like, I lived in South Africa for over 15 years, and I knew a lot of Rhodesians who in South Africa were called Wemwees because they began so many conversations of when we were in Rhodesia. And let me tell you, who destroyed Rhodesia mostly was actually the Americans and the South Africans. South Africa decided to chuck Rhodesia under the bus because they thought that by chucking Rhodesia under the bus, they wouldn't then get the next lot of heat, which of course was nonsense, because that's exactly what happened. When Rhodesia went, South Africa was the next target. The other people who destroyed Rhodesia mostly were actually the Americans. Were the Americans. The British under Thatcher, certainly. I mean, all right, Wilson actually wanted to do something about Rhodesia when he was in charge, the socialist prime minister, but he couldn't because he was told by the leaders of the British Armed Forces that sending the British Armed Forces into Rhodesia to attack white British people, basically, was not going to be on. Like, there were good chances the soldiers wouldn't do what they were told. So all he was able to do was a very limited kind of blockade off the place. And it was a joke, actually, because what the Royal Navy blockading ships used to do was pull into Durban in South Africa to get resupplied. So it was just so crazy. But anyway, so Wilson couldn't do anything. And Mrs. Thatcher had no intention of doing really anything against Rhodesia. Yes, she did that shitty Lancaster House agreement in the end. But by that stage, Rhodesia was like kind of like it just didn't want to go on anymore. Now, I fully supported Rhodesia. Ian Smith was a Spitfire pilot in the RAF in World War II. I don't think Britain should have done anything against Rhodesia, but then I don't think Rhodesia should have had to have done UDI either. I don't think Britain should have said, "Oh, we're going to give it to the black guys." But then I'm a right-wing person, a real right-wing person. So, Britain didn't destroy Rhodesia, I'm happy to say.
Weren't the Americans importing Rhodesian aluminium, or is that nonsense?
They may have been aluminum, as the Americans would have said. Yeah, maybe they were, I don't know. But I think that look, when Portugal had their coup, and so Angola and Mozambique went, Rhodesia was like not really viable after that because their flanks were exposed. And like I say, South Africa chucked them under the bus more than the UK did. But there we go.
My great-great-uncle was a member of parliament in Rhodesia, fun fact. Okay.
Yeah, no, Rhodesia was like a good country. I mean, and Zimbabwe is like a total shithole. But there we go. So,
it's often how it goes. But,
yeah. Someone actually, I was in the chat on a stream, it might have been an academic agent stream actually, and someone was asking, "Oh, African history must be really interesting," and like African history is quite interesting, but it's mostly like barbarism and raids and killing people and slavery and corruption, and then first of all the Dutch, and then probably first of all the Portuguese, then the Dutch, and then the British arrived. And it got better for a while, and that's about all you can say about African history, really. And now it's going back the way it always was before. Hasn't changed at all.
No.
So yeah, I don't know. Adam, what do you reckon, mate?
I don't know. Could you ever revive a state like Rhodesia?
No. Look, to my mind, where the Afrikaner guys made their mistake was prior to the con artist Mandela becoming president. And Mandela was a terrorist who did organise a bombing campaign. He never denied it. And most of the ANC bombs killed black people, not white people, by the way. But anyway, they also used to burn down schools because they said no education without freedom. And so there's whole generations of black South Africans who can't read or write at all, mainly because of the ANC. But anyway, that's a different story. But when the Afrikaners had their chance was that prior to the release of that con artist Mandela, and everyone after him, by the way, has been worse. But anyway, they should have consolidated into one area. which could have then been majority white. But of course, people weren't willing to do that because that would have meant giving up land that they'd had. One of my good mates was an Afrikaner guy, and his family were four trackers, pioneer guys who went off into the middle of Africa in the 1840s. And so his farm had been in his family, since the 1840s. And people weren't willing to move and do that. But I think that would have been their only chance. They could have created a white majority area if they had been able to get people together. The other problem, of course, is that at that stage, the white guys in South Africa were about 60% Afrikaners and about 40% English speaking, which basically just was the language you most commonly spoke at home, because everyone spoke both languages to some degree. And there was quite a big division between the English speaking South Africans and the Afrikaans speaking South Africans. There still is to some degree, although a lot of the English speaking South Africans have left, if they were able to. So yeah, I mean, there are reasons why it didn't happen, but I think that would have been the policy they should have pursued, is to have made one part of Africa majority white.
I think in about 19, I can't remember. I saw a graph on this. I think in about 1905 or 1902 or something, there was large swathes of getting on for quite a lot of the country was majority Afrikaner. So I suppose in that situation, they didn't really feel the need to do so if they had that kind of population. But I think now they're sat at 6-7% and falling.
I don't think they were ever the majority of the country, but they ran prior to the Anglo-Boer War in 1899. South Africa was divided into the Cape Province, which was the biggest province, which was British, although a small majority of the white people in the Cape were Afrikaners. Natal, which was British, which had a fairly large Afrikaner minority. You had what's called the Transvaal, which was really called the South African Republic, but everyone knows it as the Transvaal today, which actually had more non-Afrikaners than Afrikaners, although it was absolutely Afrikaans run. And then you had the Orange Free State, which was majority Afrikaans in terms of the white guys. But unlike in America or Australia, there were too many Africans to ever become a majority in Africa. And so that's the only reason there's a difference, really. Excuse me, I'm just going to deal with my pestilent dog. Rudy, shut up. Yes. Okay, so yeah, and so like I say, their only chance really would have been in the 80s to have consolidated in one part of South Africa. That would have been my preferred solution. But of course, the guys you talk to in South Africa now, or the younger fellas, they weren't around to do that at the time. And F.W. de Klerk gave away far too much, far too quickly. I mean, the white South African government was not on the edge of being overthrown when he just chucked everything away by saying and accepting all this paper promises, which in Africa mean nothing. I mean, they don't mean much anywhere else, but in Africa particularly, they don't mean anything at all.
Yeah, so, I think the Boers still have a handful of towns. I think that are majority Boer.
There are millions of South Afrikaner guys, millions of them still, but they're not the majority anywhere. They're a majority in a couple of little places, like Irania is one of these places that everyone talks about, so yeah, I mean, look, I watch South Africa and I say, the way South Africa is today is pretty much the way UK and America and Australia will go if we become minorities in our own country. It will be very much the same way. There'll be murders and kill. I mean, we already have murders, and I mean, don't we have grooming gangs, for example, infesting like most of the towns in Britain, for example, and we do nothing about them, whatever, because they're brown people. So, I just think that South Africa is, if you look at South Africa and what's happening to the white people in South Africa today, it's going to be us tomorrow if we don't change, like stopping mass immigration, for example, which to me is essential. Old Albion, yes, he is a cross-drug Russell. When did I leave South Africa? I left South Africa in 2000. I resigned from the army, from the SADF, in the early 1990s because they wanted to send my unit to townships, and I wasn't willing to do that. I was working in Durban. I was running a tourist office, and I met this very cute Australian nurse girl.
Oh.
Oh.
We got Boomer Tech. I think he's dropped off by accident.
He'll be back on in a second.
All right.
So,
should we read the chat? What's going on?
Yeah.
Rhodesians were also very good looking, all of them. Thank you very much. Sounds like a corgi. How you can guess a dog from the bark? That's a bit. Anyway, he's back now.
Cross-check, Russell. Sorry, the reason I left South Africa is I met this sort of Australian chick, and that's how I ended up in Australia. And I left in 2000. I moved over there after I left the British Army in the middle of the 1980s.
So, to segue off of this, but keep it in the same realm, since we're saying about how, it can't be revived and it's the way we're going and this, that, and the other. Did any of you see Academic Agent's stream on Ride the Tiger?
Yes, I watched it.
I thought it was really gay.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty gay too. I said so in the
found
chat.
it kind of funny as well that that they were talking about like, oh, people are like cattle, the mass man, and then like a minute later they're like, oh, Fred Dibner said some base things. It's like, right, but Fred Dibner is like the embodiment of the mass man.
Well, was he? I'm not sure.
Well,
I don't think he really was.
If you spoke to a lot of people that were around his age and grew up at that time, a lot of people will say, oh, he wasn't particularly controversial. He was just saying what most other people thought.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I don't know. I don't know how to take it. I'm not a massive Evola fan, even though I've read some of his stuff.
No,
But what do you guys think about Ride the Tiger anyway? Like in general?
Very overrated, Evelyn.
Yeah.
But that's my view. I mean, I don't know. He's anti-Christian as well, so
yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Well, I don't care about that, but I think Evola is a bit overrated. I didn't like that stream, and I pointed out in the chat that it's this Ride the Tiger stuff is very much like NRX or the clear pill or whatever you want to call it. It's saying, well, walk away from politics, don't do anything, and we'll wait for all of this globo homo to collapse. And the guys turn around and say, well, this might happen next year, and they know it won't. It might happen in 10 years, and they know it won't. But it might happen in 100 years or 1,000 years, and both of those are possibilities. And even a certainty in the latter case. But you can't do that with Britain. Like, if Britain carries on the course it's on at the moment under a conservative government, in inverted commas, by 2065, white people will be a minority in the country. And then Britain is gone. And then Britain's gone. And then Britain is gone for all practical purposes. I will even, if I'm still alive, then, which I won't be, but if I was, I would have stopped calling myself British at that point. I just would say, nah, nothing to do with me, mate.
I mean, I think building a vanguard's important. I think you can do both at the same time. I kind of disavow the idea of accelerationism. I know that's not strictly what Ride the Tiger is, but like one of the things that's always seemed to be like a really glaring, like, logical fallacy to accelerationism is it assumes that there is a point where society's had too much degeneracy, and that's the point at which it breaks apart, and you've just got to get to that point as quick as possible. And I don't think that's strictly how it happens. I mean, you could freeze progressivism now and just keep it at this state forever. It would still eventually fall apart, but for lots of other reasons. So I don't know. Acceleration to me just kind of seems like you're throwing away a lot of shit on a hope that it's going to fall apart when you want it to.
To be honest, I'm not the best read on land, but I mean, I do actually I did buy the book. I didn't read it, but I think people it was my understanding that people take acceleration out of context a little bit. I don't think he ever said we need to try and accelerate. I don't think that's his view. And
No.
it's not my view that, well, it's not my view personally that there's going to be like this grand collapse. I'm not particularly a collapsitarian. I think it will just peter out, to be honest. I don't think
I
there's going
mean,
to. It's not in the interest. Again, if you want to go back to Cicero, you know, it's not in anyone's interest to like have this like global collapse, right? So I
yeah.
don't
I
think
don't know. I think it would absolutely be in our interest to have a global collapse. I just don't think it's going to happen. I wish it would. I really do. I think it's our only way of saving ourselves in some respects. But I don't think it's going to happen, sadly.
Yeah, I mean the problem is that whether you like whether it's the clear pill or any of this NRX stuff or whether it's ride the tiger, you end up with the same scenario, which is not to sound like a wignat, but my white race will die out because it will just be a tiny minority anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, it's a two-tier issue. I mean, on the one hand is you've got to stop mass third-world immigration. You've got to do that. But on the other hand, you've got to get indigenous British birth rates up, which no one's even willing to talk about because, of course, feminism says you can't talk about that. And like this supposedly conservative government under Alexander Johnson is not conservative at all. I mean, he's told what to do by his girlfriend, who's not even his bloody wife. It's pathetic.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm keenly aware of the fact that we're talking about birth weights when it's like 3 dudes on a stream.
Well, my child's there,
Yeah.
mate. I've done it, been there, done it.
I ain't yet, so I haven't pulled my weight. It's doable. That's probably actually the most doable thing of all, because birth rates have actually been lower, like literally in the last 100 years, than they are now, and we've pulled it back. So you know, it's very doable, but the political will just isn't there, and
No,
the
not at all.
amount of groundwork you need to put the political will there. I
Well, I
mean,
mean, look, it's ever obviously you've got to look at stuff like the pill, abortion on demand, no fault divorce. All of that stuff has gone a long way to doing this, but it's been done deliberately because they want women in these like easy jobs in air-conditioned offices where they can sit on their arse all day, which is the only sort of jobs women really want to do, to be fair, or are any good at. I mean, all right, no, actually, let me change that a bit. They make pretty good nurses, and I would say they make good teachers, but they don't because they spend most of their time being left-wing feminists and indoctrinating the next generation. But,
Susie's still in the chat.
Well, fine. Listen, Susie's probably the exception that proves the rule, but all I'm saying is like in order to keep the indigenous white Anglo-Celtic British people the majority in their own nation, which they should be, you've not only got to stop mass third-world immigration, you've also got to get indigenous white birth rates up. It's a two-tier thing. It's not just one thing. You've got to do both.
Yeah. So ZVFR in chat said an accelerationist would argue that it would be better for Labour to be in power rather than pseudocons. Same liberal policies, but slower and less abrasive in representation. That's very true. I mean, and this is kind of partly selfish on my part, but I am going to have a family and I am going to have kids. And I want to try and make it slightly better, even if it's just for them, for their lifetime.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, also, you've got to look at the fact with the Labour government, look, I've said this for ages, and I don't advocate it, but I think it's going to happen. There's going to be a war with China. I mean, like, if there isn't a war with China in the next 10 years, I will be utterly amazed. And I won't be displeased because I'm not advocating for one, but I think there's going to be for one, and I think there probably needs to be one. And a Labour government would make Britain lose that war, and a lot of British servicemen will get killed with the Labour government because our forces will be too weak, particularly our naval and air forces, because I don't think anyone's dumb enough to want to fight a land war in China. and we don't need to anyway. Whereas a conservative government, we might actually win that war, just about. Only just about, because even the Tories are not spending anything like enough money on defence, and particularly not on the Royal Navy, but which is the most important service for Britain, because we're an island nation, and after Brexit, we're a global trading nation as well. So you need a navy for that. A Labour government will make us lose that war. And whilst I detest the global homo Western social liberal culture that we have at the moment, really detest it, I think the Chinese Communist government is even worse.
Yeah, I mean, there was this documentary I watched. I mean, I'm not particularly, a liberal person or whatever, who likes to use the word like oppressed or whatever, but like what is it called? Xinjiang, whatever it's called, right? Like, there's videos of the streets just empty, and there's just like Chinese flags every 2 feet, security cameras every 2 feet, every 10 feet. There's 6 police officers with riot gear on. Right, this is not an exaggeration. And they were like interviewing like these little girls and stuff, or like school kids, and they're saying like, oh yeah, half my class, their parents are in the re-education camps, and you can see like what they're being taught at school. They're like, I am Chinese, I will fight for the Communist Party of China, and the mosques are closed. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, if this was any other country other than China, right, there'd be international condemnation. It's like what would like ghettos in World War II look like? Jewish ghettos in World War II would look like if it was a bit more high tech, pretty much, right?
Or equally valid, what would the various Gulag archipelago camps in the Soviet Union look like?
Yeah, and I mean, it's they try and keep up an image of like a free place, right? But there's no Uyghurs on the street, right? It's all Han Chinese people, because all the Uyghurs have been put in the re-education facilities, right? So
I can't say I have a great deal of sympathy for Muslims, but yeah, I guess.
no, but I mean, I don't know. Like, neither do I, to be honest. But like, it's
they're all Johnny foreigners to me, mate.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's more pointing out the double standard, isn't it? But
yeah. I mean, the Chinese thing is weird because like, if that was anyone else, we'd be invading them tomorrow under the pretense of oil or some such. But I mean, the thing is with China is it's kind of like an empire without an actual empire. Is it the only way you can hit it?
Well, they're getting an empire. They're getting an empire.
They will do. But for now, they seem to be buying their time, and they're sitting in their little mainland, in their little fortress, which
no, but they're not. They're not adamant. They're not. This is the thing. They've got like bases all over the South China Sea. They have bases in Africa. They have bases in the Middle East. They're not doing what you're saying at all. They're actually spreading their tentacles far and wide.
Yeah, but not in an actual tangible way. Not in a way that the West can actually hit or do anything about. Like this is kind of like the Cold War.
No, it's not. No, it's not true. It's not true. If there was a war with China, it would be mostly a naval and air war, and it would be taking out all those poxy little bases, particularly the ones in the South China Sea.
Right,
and also hitting the port. No. You're wrong, mate. If we wait like 10, 15, 20 years, then we probably ain't going to be. When I say we, I mean like the British, the Americans, the Australians, probably the Japanese, wouldn't be strong enough to beat them. At the moment, we would, at sea and in the air. And like, if you could take out all those bases and you could write off, say, 2/3 of the Chinese Navy and half their Air Force, that sets China back like 70, 80 years easy.
That doesn't stop what I'm saying to being true, though.
Go on then.
Well, I'm just saying that they're biding their time till we have become weakened. They can have bases, but at the end of the day, they can lose all them, and it doesn't actually affect China as a country. And they know that, and we know that, and a lot of their other stuff is through soft power, but we don't know how to fight that, and we've never known how to fight that because it was the same in the Cold War. I mean, the Russians were filling Hollywood and the universities with communist subversion. Meanwhile, we were dropping napalm on Vietnam villages. I mean, we didn't know how to fight any of that stuff except with the hammer. And
I'm not sure that's entirely true. I mean, for
the Americans.
One thing,
yeah, sorry,
it wasn't just the Russians who were filling the universities and the theaters a lot of it was like other Europe. They came from other places in Europe, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, this is like what Yuri Bezmenov. He had a book called, when he was originally under his pen name, called World Thought Police, and he was talking because he was one of the guys that went over to India and was like help spreading subversion in India. But
Yeah.
what they would do is they would court the factions over there that were trying to cause trouble. So I mean, I guarantee if we knew enough, you'd find that like the Soviets worked quite well alongside the Fabian Society. You know,
Oh yeah,
took
for sure.
something that
Yeah,
had-
Fabian Society were thoroughly bad lot. I totally agree with that.
And
So,
we just,
sorry,
I mean,
Roy, you were trying to say something a minute
Although
ago.
you brought up Vietnam, I was just going to say, seeing as you were talking about the conflict there, that eventually the Americans would have won because they were killing more Vietnamese than Americans were getting killed. It was a war. It was a war of attrition. But again,
yeah.
I guess the American public just didn't really feel like it. So
Yeah, but the Americans weren't willing to invade the North, and they had to invade the North to win. You know, if you're going to stop at the border, you're not going to win. It's
You see
as
this
simple
with a
as
lot
that.
of the pro-gun Republicans, don't they? When people say like, and I'm kind of fairly pro-firearms myself, but when people will say like, you can't win a war against the government, they've got drones and this, that, and the other, and people go, "Ooh, well, my Vietnam," and they seem to miss it. That's just like the American army could have absolutely crushed the Viet Cong.
If they'd have been willing to invade the North, but also
Yeah.
the people the drone guys are morons, to be honest. Like drones can't hold ground. You know, this might come as a surprise to people. I don't think it will to you guys, but it might to some people. Like the Allies, if you want to call them that, did not win in Iraq and did not win in Afghanistan.
No.
And we had all the drones and all the aircraft and all the missiles, and we still didn't win. And we will not win. Like I mean, maybe we could have won at some point in Afghanistan if there'd been a plan to do so and then get out. And the same thing in Iraq to some degree. But you can't fight a war without infantry, for example, because only infantry can occupy and hold ground. Drones can't do that.
No, but I mean, also we seem to have lost sort of the idea of how to use and wield power in the West against our enemies.
Well, it's also casualties. You know, like Britain lost in Afghanistan. I think it was like 4 so far, because there are still British troops there, not many, but some. Lost about 470 guys in Afghanistan, which was the second most after the Americans. And every one of those guys was a tragedy, particularly because we had never had a plan or intention of winning there. They died for absolutely nothing, as far as I'm concerned. That's one reason my son's serving in the Royal Navy and not in the British Army, because I didn't want him being sent there for no purpose. Like I'm not at all a pacifist or anything like that. I was in the British Army, served in the SADF. All my family were British soldiers, going back to my great grandfather at least. But I don't believe in wars you don't intend to win. There's no point in fighting a war you're never going to win. It's just getting casualties for no purpose, and that was what was happening in Afghanistan, in my opinion. Apart from the fact that the Labour government at the time used it as an excuse to absolutely destroy the Royal Navy. Like the Royal Navy was like 5 times stronger at the start of that war than it was at the end of it, because they scrapped and sold so many warships and cut down the manpower of the Navy. And the Navy, to me, is a much more important service to Britain than the Army is, particularly. And I speak as a soldier because we're an island nation, you know. The British Army should be a projectile that is fired by the Royal Navy, in my opinion. But anyway, those 460, 470 casualties, whatever it is now, Britain lost more than that in one battle in Afghanistan in 1880. You know, but in these days, that's like, oh my God, we've got to run away. You know, this is the problem. Like Western nations won't take casualties anymore, really. And this is what makes me laugh about the current British Army policy of, we want a division that we can deploy somewhere. But it's this weird kind of a division that might have 1 armoured brigade and 2 light mechanized brigades with these light APCs that can move quickly but will get destroyed by any 30mm gun on the battlefield. And a 1 division British Army, if it was fighting a near peer enemy on land, like the Russians or the Chinese, would be destroyed in less than 2 weeks if it was winning, because it's so small. It's just ridiculous, you know.
What's
the British Army now makes the British Army in 1914 look enormous.
Yeah. Isn't it? I think it's about 80. Was it 75, 80,000 they've got?
Yeah, it's something like that. And most of those guys, and a lot of those guys are not deployable because they don't have the kit to be deployed. Or they can only be deployed for like shitty roles, like training African soldiers in Kenya or something like that. You know, they're of no use in actually fighting a war. They don't have, and like Britain's got about 250 tanks now. That's less tanks than Britain had after the Dunkirk invasion, after the Dunkirk debacle. It's like, it's just a joke. It's the British Army. I love the British Army. I really do. I adore the British Army. It used to be my religion when I was a young man. But the British Army now is a damn joke. Good. There's still good people in it. There are still very good people in it. But a lot of the senior officers are political. And all this stuff that we have seen recently about the feminization of the American armed forces applies absolutely equally to the British Armed Forces and the Australian Defence Force. Totally the same thing is going on. Like, they're lowering standards all the time to allow women to go and do roles that they are simply not suited for. And that will lose us wars and get people killed.
How much does it cost to train a infantryman in the British Army? Like, let's say 150, 200 years ago. Because it's prohibitively expensive now.
Yeah, it was still quite expensive even then. That's why armies were small in the 18th century. Like the Napoleon's thing was, he started these big conscript armies, and French soldiers at the start of the certainly in the Revolutionary Wars, but even in some of Napoleon's campaigns, were not especially well trained. That's why he used these big columns to attack, because you didn't have to be so well trained to get a load of guys in close formation, like advancing on the enemy, and only the first rank or two could even fire. Whereas the British Army was trained to fight in two ranks, long, thin red lines. And you had to be very well trained to be able to do that, not only to stand your ground, but also to maneuver in that formation as well. Whereas you didn't have to be so well trained to attack in a big column, which was basically actually a bit wider than it was deeper anyway. But and the Napoleon's thing worked because continental soldiers got scared by these great masses of troops coming at them, and basically most of them ran away. British Army didn't do that. It would fire 1 or 2 volleys and then charge with a bayonet, and the French would almost invariably run away. But anyway, that's a different story. But yeah, it is quite expensive to train a soldier, and a soldier is also pretty much useless. An infantry soldier, for example, he's not really trained until he's been in 9 months, say.
Yeah,
and even then, just about, like a guy who's been in 18 months will be better trained than the guy who's been in 9 months. But until he's been in 9 months, he's hardly worth being there at all, really. Like Britain has, like the Royal Marines are very good still. The Parachute Regiment are very good still, and they're the last units that are holding out against getting chicks put out all over the place. Which is partly because they're the units that are most likely to see action. And like the British Army did tests in the 90s when they compared sections, which is your lowest subunit, it's 8 guys basically. They had all female sections, they had mixed sections, and they had male sections. And the male sections always vastly outperformed the other 2. And then they did the same thing with platoons, which is 3 sections, so it's about 30 guys. And all male platoons always outperformed mixed platoons and all female platoons by a long way. The American US Marine Corps did exactly the same thing, exactly the same result. Squatty Buckers, I didn't forget the guards. Guards are okay, mate. I'm not slagging the guards off at all. I'm not going to say a word about the TikToks, okay? But anyway, I actually did the Purbright Purbright assault course once, long time ago, long time ago. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, like women don't belong in frontline roles in the military. They certainly don't belong in the infantry. In my opinion, they don't belong in the armor tanks. They don't belong in the Royal Artillery. They don't really belong on warships, in my honest opinion, either. But there you go.
Well, I think you brought up there something interesting, talking about conscript armies. With the, I think in the Napoleonic Wars, obviously the British didn't conscript. I think it was entirely recruit army, right? I think Arthur Wellesley, I think, didn't have particularly nice things to say about the British army. I think he said he was jealous of Napoleon, even though, of course, he was winning at the time. He was jealous of Napoleon because he had a he had a wide variety of people in his army, and not. I think.
Yeah, no, hang on
though.
hang on. You've got to be fair. Like, if you look at my screen name, there's a reason I've got this screen name. It's because I know a lot about Wellington. And Wellington is always, they always use this quote about, oh yeah, we've got the scum of the earth in the British Army. They all enlisted for drink. But no one ever quotes the second part of that, which is where he says, but it is wonderful, the fine fellows that we have made them.
Of course. Well, yeah.
And he also said of his army in the Peninsular War, you know, the war where he first liberated Portugal, then liberated Spain, and then invaded the south of France with the British Army. He also turned around and said that with his Peninsular Army, he could go anywhere and do anything. And when he said he had an infamous army at Waterloo, he was comparing it to the brilliant army he had in the Peninsula, because after the Peninsular War, Britain sent most of his best troops to America because the Americans were trying to take over Canada. And that was the British Army that landed and captured the Washington, D.C. and burnt the White House. That was Wellington's Peninsular Army. It was a damn good army. And like he said, it could go anywhere and do anything. And his army at Waterloo was actually very bad compared to his Peninsular War army. And it still beat Napoleon.
Yeah, it was sort of a ragtag. I think they had a lot of Germans, a lot of Dutch people in it as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They had loads of Dutch guys, as Faust likes to tell us all the time, many of which units ran away, but I don't generally say that, but of course, they did.
Those of us who have watched, what was it, Sharp, will remember the behaviour of the Prince of Orange during that. But,
yeah, Prince of Orange wasn't the best of generals. Sharp was, Sharp's, I've got my problems with Sharp. Like, he's a terrible simp. But yeah, he is. He's a terrible, my lady. But yeah, no, he's a terrible simp. But the portrayal of the Prince of Orange is not inaccurate, actually. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's just that you can't say Wellington saying things.
Well, I wasn't, but I mean, I think he did say he was jealous of Napoleon because he had a conscript army that meant there was like a wide variety of people from different classes and stuff like that. I think that's I think
he had a bigger army. He had a bigger army. Like, Wellington was constantly getting letters from the British government when he was in Portugal and Spain saying, "Look, you've got the only British army. If you lose it, we can't replace it." Whereas, like, Napoleon could just raise as many troops as he needed, pretty much, until right at the end of the war.
Mm. Well, who's the King of Ireland anyway?
Well, there was quite a lot of Irish troops in the British Army in Wellington's day, and many of them were very fine regiments. I mean, the 88 Foot, the Connaught Rangers, who were Rudyard Kipling's Devil's Own, were a very good regiment.
I was just reading something in the chat. Yeah, but
who is the King of Ireland, you swine? Yeah, right, okay. Certainly wasn't Napoleon, was it? But anyway. Napoleon's army at Waterloo was not very bad. Napoleon's army at Waterloo was the best of his troops who were left, basically. They were a damn good army, actually, and any commander other than Wellington would have lost, as indeed Blucher, the Prussian commander, did.
Well, I think there was, I mean, obviously he'd just come off Elba, right? So it would have been the French army would have been the same one they had under the Bourbons. Surely.
Well, it was kind of, but also loads and loads of officers rejoined his colours, like loads of Napoleonic officers rejoined his colours, and the units, and he had the best army he'd had since before 1812 when he foolishly invaded Russia.
Hmm.
Like the French cavalry, for example, was very strong at Waterloo, which it wasn't in 1814 when he was defeated and forced to abdicate.
Interesting one, Napoleon.
Yeah, not a nice guy. Like Wellington was seen twice, once after Waterloo, but also after the siege of Badajoz on the Spanish-Portuguese border, when thousands of British troops were killed storming the place. And Wellington was seen twice in absolute tears from his losses. Like, it's impossible to imagine Napoleon ever doing that. Napoleon didn't give a shit about how many of his soldiers were killed, which is why the longer he was in power, like when he started off, he was quite a tactical genius. But the longer he was in power, the more he went in for these massed frontal attacks, which is kind of what he tried to do at Waterloo, to be honest.
He abandoned his troops in Egypt, didn't he? He abandoned a lot of his...
After Nelson had destroyed the French fleet, yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, he ran away. Yeah, he ran away and left. Also, he killed loads of guys who had to plague in Egypt. Loads of French soldiers. He had them killed. He was completely ruthless and didn't have a humane bone in his body, Napoleon. No, I'm not an admirer of him at all. He was not a nice man. He was a good general in his day, but he was not a nice man at all.
No, well, I was when I was a bit younger, a bit of an admirer of Napoleon, but it's mainly
a lot of people are until they read a bit more about him. But yeah, I don't know. Wellington was a far better man, and actually, in my opinion, a better general. But I mean, that's my opinion.
Going back to the Iraq War, I was going to ask you, as like a military guy, is there more to the invasion of like Iraq, you think, than just oil? Is there anything more like to? Was there any? Because you said we didn't go in it to win, right? So what do you think we went? What did we go in for? Just oil?
I have no. I'm spreading global homo is the only thing I can come up with. Honestly, it really is. I don't know what else they were trying to do. Like America, until Biden started shutting it all down, America was self-sufficient in oil. It was an oil exporter, which it mostly has been, except for in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Biden's doing his best to close all that down in the same way that Alexander Johnson is doing his best to close any sort of British energy production down that is not green and therefore inefficient and very expensive and making people poorer. This is all being done for a reason, in my opinion. I'm sorry, it just is. Like the whole green agenda, the climate change agenda, all of it it's got the same reasoning behind it. It is to make Western nations poorer at the same time as they're importing these millions and millions of people from the third world and the 1% who run us. When they turn around and say, in 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy and you won't have any privacy and you'll be happy, they're not lying, mate. That's what they want. I really think it is. I really think that's what they want. Well, and Alexander Johnson, I mean, his dad worked for the World Bank. His dad worked for a European organization. And the idea that Alexander Boris Johnson is even slightly a sort of patriot is absolute nonsense.
Well, he's sort of just like a bumbling upper class bloke, isn't he? That seems to be my impression of him.
Well, he was big mates with Cameron. I mean, Cameron certainly wasn't any sort of real conservative either. So,
No. Well, I know going over to the army, I mean, in terms of Iraq, I guess one guess I'd have is that in the US, essentially, especially with things like, people say military industrial complex, obviously, like the sort of supply chains and things like that, people make the accusation that the United States military is essentially at this point a jobs program. So
no, I don't think it's that. I mean, I thought it was interesting that Biden hadn't been in power 2 weeks before he was sending global homo missiles into people in the Middle East. Why? I mean, I was never a huge Donald Trump fan, but he certainly wasn't in favor of like forever wars that don't do anything. So I don't know, man. I just, like I said, I'm not pacifist. I think we are probably going to end up fighting a war in China against China, and if we do, I certainly want us to win it. But I'm not in favor of these stupid wars trying to spread global homo over different places at all. And then I know there are some people who will say, "Oh, you're just going to spread global homo over China." Don't think so, because I don't think China will be destroyed, and China certainly can't be invaded. It's too big. But I reckon getting rid of their navy and half their air force would be a good idea. Yeah, I'd invade Hong Kong. Let's take it back. That'd be a good idea. I'm only half joking as well. But anyway, I'm only half joking about it. I think Mrs. Thatcher was terrible giving away Hong Kong. She didn't have to, because Hong Kong Island itself and the peninsula were actually British forever. It was only the new territories which were leased. So she didn't have to give it away. But of course, had she not given it away, Britain would have had to have reinforced it, and she didn't want to spend the money.
I don't know. The Iraq one's funny. I mean, when I just said for oil earlier, I was kind of being slightly facetious. I mean, Saddam was a dickhead, right? Like he wasn't a good dude. But
no, he wasn't a good dude. But I mean, whether he was worse for the Iraqi people than the guys who are in charge now, I don't know. Not sure.
Well,
not sure.
It seems to me that in terms of those countries in the Middle East, you've got basically a choice of Islamic fundamentalism or Arab nationalism, right? There's no real third option. There's no.
There is. There's strongman dictators with moustaches who are in the military, and from my point of view, I think the Brits and the West generally should keep the strongman with moustaches who are in the military, because they're not really interested in Islamic extremism.
Well, I don't know. They seem to pick one of two flavors, don't they? I suppose. But I suppose Gaddafi was an Arab nationalist. Saddam was an Arab nationalist. You've got Khomeini, who's an Islamic fundamentalist.
Yeah, but were they really Arab nationalists? I don't know. You know.
Well, they claim to be, but
of course they claim to be. Yeah, they claim to be all sorts of things.
I don't know. But it seems to be those are the two flavors you sort of.
I mean, look at Syria. Look at Syria. I mean, I don't think there's any reason to get rid of Assad from Britain and the West point of view. I don't. I think Russia is Russia supporting Assad. Fine, let them do it. I'd sooner have Assad than ISIS. Anyway.
Well, absolutely. Yeah.
So why therefore? I mean, I do believe that the CIA and to some degree MI6 set up ISIS. I do believe that for certain.
There was this black guy I used to know. He used to give the most pro-US take possible on everything. He was from Ghana or something. He was like, "Oh well, I know that Bashar al-Assad is the better of the two options, but the US has decided he has to go, so he has to go now." It was one of the most ridiculous takes ever.
Yeah,
this guy.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah.
Americanism's gone too far. Anyway, sorry, Crown.
I don't give a shit about Assad. Assad might be nice or might be nasty to his people. I don't care. I'm not Syrian. So long as he's not sending guys to attack us, I don't care. That's my utter opinion. It's real politics as far as I'm concerned. If Assad is keeping the peace in Syria and he's not sending the terrorists to attack us, good luck to it. He can get on with it. It's up to the Syrians to do something about him. Nothing to do with us. That's my opinion. But you've also got, this applies far more to the US than it does the UK. You've also got this nonsense about Israel. I'm entirely neutral about Israel. I'm not anti-Israel. I'm not pro-Israel. They are not an ally. They're not an enemy. And that's my total opinion on Israel. Don't care. If Israel wants to get its sons killed doing something in the Middle East, let Israel go and do it. I'm not in favor of our sons being killed to do it.
Yeah.
That is absolutely my view. I'm totally neutral on it. I don't think Israel's our great ally in the Middle East at all. I don't think we have any great allies in the Middle East unless it's maybe Oman, because Oman we give a lot of aid to.
So
Yeah.
Russia, ally
Russia.
or enemy?
Neither. I feel exactly the same. I don't think Russia's a natural enemy of Britain, particularly now. I mean, it was in the Cold War, sure, but now, no, I don't think it really is. I don't think. I mean, I wouldn't have British troops in the Baltic republics. I wouldn't have British troops there. Why?
Okay, so
I
do you
might
think,
put. I wouldn't put British troops further east than Poland.
so I was going to carry on with this, but actually there's something else I want to ask. Do you think that do you think there was a year when the Great Game between Britain and Russia actually came to a proper end?
No, I think what happened was that vile scumbag Grey, the Liberal Foreign Secretary, tied Britain into the Entente Cordiale and then extended it to Russia, and that's when it stopped. But I think it was an idiot move and was a large push into Britain joining the First World War. And as I've said many times on this stream, the original sin of Great Britain and the British Empire was joining the First World War in 1914,
Correct.
in particular in raising a mass army, a mass land army against all British tradition. And that was Grey and the Liberals doing, and it was a disaster. And Churchill absolutely supported it. Another reason, I mean, I dislike Churchill for that more than I do for things he did in World War II. And he made a lot of mistakes in World War II, not least thinking the Americans were our mates, which they never were. But there we go. So I don't think the Great Game ever ended. I think Grey gave in, basically, if you see what I mean, and said, okay, now you're going to be our allies now. And of course, Russia would soon have Britain as an ally against Germany, that it would be like possibly having to fight Germany or Britain, or maybe both, you know. Salisbury, as I said, I think Salisbury was the last real British Conservative Prime Minister, and Salisbury recognised that Britain's best position was like, we're not allies with any of you. We have our own interests. And in a war situation, we may come down on one side or the other, which gave Britain total freedom of action, but also made all these other states like Russia, France, and Germany much less likely to fight each other because they didn't know what the British were going to do and couldn't rely on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, to quote Vladimir Putin on Russian foreign policy, I think he said, "I am not your friend. I am not your enemy. I am the president of Russia."
Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable. And I didn't, by the way, believe all that stuff about, you know, Russians being poisoned with all sorts of shit in the middle of England. I thought there was something very suspicious about that as well. Yeah. It wasn't at all sure what was going on there, but I don't think it was what was really going on. If you see what I mean.
the thing is with Russia, I think at this point they have the GDP and economic impact of, I think, Italy at this point. Like it's seriously not a world power anymore. It's a country that's there.
It's not, but it's got a very big, very powerful military that can operate in its own areas. So I don't see why you are putting the British Army in the Baltic states, which is next door to Russia, where they could not possibly win.
Well,
I don't see the purpose in that. I don't see the purpose in that.
They can't control their own currency. I mean,
but that doesn't require British troops. I'm sorry, it doesn't. That's not a reason to put British troops in your country. I would not have any British troops east of Poland. And the only reason I've had them in Poland would be really for traditional reasons going back to World War II. I don't really even think they should be in Poland. I don't think there should be any British troops on the continent at all. None. In Europe, none. I wouldn't have one British grenadier in Europe. I think they should all be in UK, British overseas territories, or they should be in an expeditionary force that can be sent anywhere Britain wants to send them by the Royal Navy.
How many of them do you think there should be in terms of the Army Air Force?
I think the Army should be about 100,000 men in total. It should have at least about 400 tanks rather than 250 it has at the moment. And it should be a projectile that could be fired by the Royal Navy anywhere in the world. And the Royal Navy should have enough amphibious warships, and it needs a couple of helicopter carriers to back up the QEs. that could also fly a few F-35Bs. It needs a couple of the Royal Navy is far too weak. Well, it's got a nominal 19 major surface escorts. Really, it's only 17, and it needs at least 25. It's got 7 hunter-killer nuclear submarines. That's the submarines that mainly fire torpedoes, not the ballistic subs. 7. We need like 10 or 12, not 7. And if we can't afford to build that number, and I don't think we can, because we don't have enough shipyards, because we're just starting to build the dreadnought class of missile subs, which we also need, because Peking and no one else can like nuke London, because we'll nuke Beijing back. So they just won't do it. That's what nuclear deterrence is about. Scotty Buckers, actually, the RAF, I think, gets too much funding at the moment for the little that they do. And I have a mate who's in the RAF regiment, so he will forgive me, I hope. But the Royal Navy is too small. It needs 25 major service escorts. The amphibious force is too small. Bits of it were sold. Like Australia's got one of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary landing ships that the Tony Blair sold off to fund his idiot war in Afghanistan. The British, the Navy needs expanding. The Army needs expanding a bit. It does, but not that much. And more money should go on things like the maritime patrol aircraft for the Royal Air Force, because they're important. You need those to clear areas for your subs and this kind of stuff. I think the idea of like buying 2 sorts of F-35 that the RAF is trying to do at the moment is a moron move, because the main place they should be deployed is on the QE class carriers. Like the QE class, they can carry 70 aircraft, but we're talking about putting 20 on them, which is ridiculous. We could put 20 just about on the Invincible class.
I believe there's currently none on the QE2. Is that correct?
Oh, no. There's none because she's not operating. When she operates, don't look at how the air groups go on ships. Do you see what I mean? So when the ship go, like later this year, there's going to be a Royal Navy carrier task force that's coming out to go through the South China Sea to do a freedom of navigation thing, and is then going to come and visit Australia, and as well as other places in the area. And apparently, from everything I've read, it's going to be HMS Queen Elizabeth, 2 Type 45 air defense destroyers, which are very good ships, but don't have as many missiles as they could carry, which in a war is ridiculous because they're just going to run out. And 2 Type 23 frigates, which are good anti-submarine frigates, but 2 isn't enough. And also, obviously, there'll be some Royal Fleet Auxiliaries, and there'll be an SSN hunter-killer nuclear submarine as well. But that's not, in a real war, that task group's not realistic. I mean, in a real war, 2 Type 45 destroyers, which are air defense destroyers, might be enough if they had their full complement of missiles rather than what they carry at the moment. But you'd need at least 4 frigates, not 2. 2 is half what you need. And if it had 4 frigates and 2 Type 45s plus the SSN and the Queen Elizabeth, and the Queen Elizabeth had at least 3 squadrons of aircraft on it, which is to say, 36 or so rather than 20, then no one in the world could fight that except the Yanks. Nobody, and we ain't going to be fighting the Yanks. So, Squatty Buckers, I've never heard of Bojo's plan to create a Ranger regiment. Ranger regiments were the American copy of the Commandos, so why would Britain need one of those? But anyway, I don't know. I just think, Royal Navy needs to be stronger. More money needs to be spent on British defence than is being spent at the moment. But the British Army at the moment is just a bad joke. And it's partly because the British Army can't decide what it wants to do. It's got this plan of we're going to be able to put a division somewhere. Well, the British Army put a division in the first Gulf War and put 2/3 a division in the second Gulf War, and I suppose we had a Commonwealth division in the Korean War, but we've never put a division anywhere apart from that since World War II. So I don't know why they particularly want to put a division somewhere. I mean, unless you're going to fight Russia, and a division against Russia, even if you're winning, will last about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then you've got no replacements for it. So then what do you do? It's bollocks. It's crap, in my opinion.
So
Well, it's like
something.
sorry,
Go on.
No. I was just going to say, if anyone's seen Yes Minister, there was a which is the old BBC drama. There was a thing like explaining how if the Russians invaded the UK, I think it was in the height of the Cold War, we would have lasted about 2 weeks. And obviously, they suspected that a lot of our missiles.
No, hang on. That's not true. You see, that's not true. Like, I was in the British Army at the height of the Cold War in the early 1980s, and it's not true. Britain had 3 divisions in Germany. 3. Not a bare one. 3. And that's a reasonable force. If you can put 3 divisions somewhere, that's a reasonable force. In addition to that, we could have put at least 2 or 3 brigades in other places, and still have had 3 or 4 brigades in England.
Okay.
The British Army.
The
British Army in the middle of in the early 1980s, the British Army was nearly 200,000 men.
It's a pretty reasonable force. Yeah.
Yeah, it was vastly bigger, and we had nearly 1,000 tanks, main battle tanks. I'm not talking about these bloody little reconnaissance vehicles that the press calls tanks these days, which we now have about 250 main battle tanks, and they're getting bloody old and they need updating at least. But in the British Army in the 1980s, totally different story. People don't even realise, right? The Royal Navy now has a nominal 19 frigates and destroyers, yeah? At the time of the Falklands War in 1982, we had 70 frigates and destroyers. Now, they were less good than the ones we got now, but still, one ship can still only be in one place. We had 70 frigates and destroyers in the Falklands War, not 19, and really only 17. People just don't realise how vast the cuts have been in the British Armed Forces since that era.
So what do we think about the stuff with the flags? I mean, this does kind of come back to this in a way. It will, where people have, especially the BBC, kicked off about MPs having flags in the background.
Oh, it's the Robert. What was his name? Robert Kendrick, I think his name is. That they kicked off about. He had a flag and a picture of QE2 in the background. Not the ship, of course. The person. But.
Yeah, but they've been complaining about this stuff for a while, haven't they? In one form or another.
But how can you complain about a British MP having the Union Jack or the Cross of St George or a picture of Queen Elizabeth behind him? That's ridiculous.
Well, I do kind of find it a bit funny. There's that Elizabeth woman who's like, I don't know, like I suppose the queen of FBPE accounts or something, and she rages about flag shaggers all the time. And then when she was slightly pushed by, Kirsty Allsop, the woman who does the housing programs, about why it was that she didn't like it, all she could come out with was, well, they didn't used to do it and now they do, and it's putting people off or something.
Well, people who don't like the British, you mean?
Yeah, I suppose so. So that's what she really wanted to say.
Maybe they're like Morgoth and their granny spanked them over a chair with a Union Jack on it or something, Because I think that's why Morgoth doesn't like the Union Jack. He got spanked over a chair.
He doesn't like it because he's a German National Socialist. But going back to what you said in terms of people kicking off about the Union flag. I mean, if you look at Tony Blair's 1997 address, there was Union flag imagery constantly. You can see they gave out little plastic Union flags to fly around outside the number 10. There's a clip of it on YouTube, right? In 1997.
Yeah, and they were all Labour Party supporters, not real people who were doing that, by the way. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, but they were flying Union flags. That's the point. But I know a lot of people were kicking off about Keir Starmer recently, deciding to put the Union Jack in the background. Obviously, they've done that because, some advisor somewhere has said you need to be more patriotic for people up north. But it looks really ingenuine. I mean, it is ingenuine at the end of the day. But
well, when Labour do it, yeah, of course it is. But okay, I'm going to ask a couple of questions in chat briefly,
Well,
guys.
hang on, just one quick thing.
Go.
Because there was a thing. Oh shit, I forgot which one it was. Right at the beginning of January, I think it's when the Orthodox calendar's New Year is in Russia, and Putin was doing his thing, right, doing his religious duty. And a lot of people, like here in the UK, were trying to say, "Oh, but that's fake. He's probably not even that religious." And it's like, right, but you can't actually expect a politician to be honest, but you can sort of force their hand to shill for you.
Yeah. To some degree,
And I mean, if Labour's willing to go against its own supporters and like fly the flag to try and win back the Red Wall, which was never called the Red Wall, like historically, that's something you can use against them.
Yep, I agree.
Well, there's been this whole Northern Independence Party thing recently. I think people do laugh at it, but I think they're now polling, I think, something like 33-1, if anyone understands polling odds.
Yeah, but you've also got to realise something is that the patriotic people in the north of England, and there are a lot of them in the north and the Midlands of England, have a lot in common with the patriotic people in the rural areas, particularly of the south of England. There isn't that big a divide between those guys. They're all patriotic people, and in my opinion, all of those guys are they're really holding traditional Britain and traditional British views.
That's correct. I mean, my grandfather, who's from the south of England, and my grandmother, who is from North Midlands, but she's a Labour voter. She's working class, right? I'd say they had pretty much the same views, even though one would usually vote Conservative and one would vote Labour. That's just because of
that's traditional Labour. You're talking about Labour like in the 1950s and so on, rather than like Labour in the 2000s, I presume.
Well, yeah, I was just trying to point out that your point that their view on patriotism wasn't really very different. I mean, I wouldn't say that between my grandmother and my grandfather, either of them was more or less patriotic than the other. But,
that was what I was trying to say.
I mean, this is something that kind of always ends up happening. I mean, you saw this with Ireland a lot, but now you see it with Scotland and Wales too. Is that the actual the political party or the group that's pushing towards independence is pushing towards independence because they think that like the larger body, which is Britain, is like too right wing and it's holding them back from their leftist utopia. And then when they get their independence, if they get it, you end up with a society that's actually very traditional for a few decades at least, before sort of subversion sort of catches up to them.
Yeah, I mean, look at Ireland. You're absolutely right. But actually, that one might make an interesting subject for people to talk about. Is Ireland was this very traditional Catholic society for years and years and years after it separated from Great Britain, and then in the space of like just 10, 15 years, totally destroyed. And even people who were supposedly Irish nationalists, like Sinn Féin, for example, which was the political wing of the Provisional IRA, who were always mostly Marxists, are absolutely full-on globo homo, and let's have as many black people in Ireland as we can.
I always forget who say this, but there was some comment after, I think it was Pope John Paul went to Drogheda. I don't know how you say it. I can't do Irish words. You know what I mean. On the border with Northern Ireland, he spoke quite famously. and I think he did denounce the IRA to his credit. But after that, I can't remember. I think it was the provincial IRA. It may have been them and the real IRA and someone else.
The real IRA is almost non-existent, mate. The provisional IRA were the guys.
It would have. I think it was the provisional IRA.
Pirate, as we called them when I did 2 tours in Northern Ireland.
I believe
they were the scumbags that blew up kids and horses and old men and shot blokes in front of their wife, and they were utter scumbags. But,
yeah, well, I think someone high up in the leadership there made a statement that after Drogheda, after Pope John Paul gave the speech in Drogheda, that they were no longer fighting for Catholicism, they were fighting for socialism instead. But I can't remember who said it. It was in a documentary, I think, but I can't remember exactly who said it. So don't hold me to that statement too much if it isn't legitimate. But I think they did say that. That they weren't fighting for Catholicism or Irish nationalism; they were fighting for socialism.
Well, like I said, the provisional IRA were always, if they weren't just gangsters, and quite a lot of the provisional IRA were pretty much just gangsters. But when they weren't that, they were Marxists.
Yeah,
and that's why Sinn Féin today fully supports like Ireland becoming totally multicultural.
Well, yeah, I mean, Irish republicanism is and was a living endeavor, right? It's at its core, right? It's trying to overthrow, the substantiated authority, right?
Yeah, but the point I was trying to get to before was that Ireland was this very traditional culture, and I'm just going to highlight this chap. Ireland was this very traditional, very Roman Catholic culture, and stayed that way for a long time, but then it's just been destroyed in like 10, 15 years.
Yeah, they became a big tech center, didn't they? For a long time.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just amazing to me how quickly that traditional society was destroyed. And they've got all the, in air quotes, benefits of global homo now, like abortion on demand and large numbers of immigrants, and I'm sure they'll end up getting Muslim terrorism at some stage.
Not in the 8 counties, though. Not in the 8 counties to their eternal credit up there in Northern Ireland.
No, Northern Ireland has kind of not accepted that stuff. Although I made the point in our last Splendid Isolation strip that there's been a report from the British government that both Protestant and Catholic schools in Northern Ireland are not doing enough sex education at a young enough age, and not including enough LGBTQ trans shit in that sex education. So why is that being pushed all the time? Why is that being pushed all the time?
I want to hope that maybe Northern Ireland's got a bit more in them still left to push back. I mean, they do that. I always forget what it's called. I've brought this up before, but it's like the march under the bridge or the protest under the bridge. The rally under the bridge, maybe.
That's in Scotland, I think. But
is it in Scotland?
Maybe it's not. I think it's in Scotland.
I'm sure.
Maybe I think there's 2 of them. Maybe I don't know.
And I mean, they like walk along with pictures of like Lee Rigby and Union flags everywhere.
That was in Scotland. Yeah.
That one is in Scotland. All right.
But Ulster shall remain firm till the very end. Anyway.
Yeah, but Scotland, like people forget this about Scotland, but like there's a big divide in Scotland on like religious and ethnic grounds, and this is the reason you have like Glasgow Rangers and Glasgow Celtic. Glasgow Rangers is the actual Scottish team, and Glasgow Celtic is a lot of Irish immigrant guys team, and you used to get Irish flags flown at Glasgow Celtic games, and you get graffiti in different parts of Glasgow. I lived in Scotland for a bit, and you get graffiti in different parts of Glasgow, which was about Ireland. It had nothing to do with Scotland, and the SNP have very much tried to get that Irish nationalism turned into Scottish nationalism. Very much tried to do that. There's a kind of secret Irish thing about Scottish nationalism. But I mean, like my mum was Irish, okay, and my mum was Irish from the Republic. She came from Tipperary, the place in the song. Although her dad was actually a Welsh ex-RAF bloke from World War II. But her mum was Southern Irish, and she was born in Southern Ireland. She went to a Roman Catholic convent school, hated nuns for her whole life because they were apparently pretty vicious. But yeah, so I mean, you know, I kind of take a nuanced view of some of this stuff. And I agree, John McNamara, a lot of what you're saying there is actually true. But yeah, and I'm a unionist, you know. I mean, I'd like one day for Ireland to come back into some loose British Federation. That's what I'd like. You know, the Republic of Ireland. I'd you know, still be self-governing, but maybe like be at least related trade-wise and all the rest of it to Britain. I reckon that'd be a good deal. I'd support that totally.
I don't know. The idea of self-governance sounds like a psyop.
No. I mean, internal self-government. You know, like Irish Home Rule. What should have happened in the first place, but never did because Gladstone was such a twat. But
under the supreme authority of the King of England, to take it.
I'm not
King of Ireland.
No, hang on, guys. Hang on.
Yeah,
Yeah, all right. Hang on. Look, let me get this straight. I see where all this LARPing about supreme monarchs comes from. I do, but I don't think it's practical, and I think it's stupid. Frankly, I really do. I do see where it comes from. Look, because it's never going to happen. It's just never going to happen. We're never going to have a supreme monarch.
Well, I mean, we're probably never going to save our country either, but here we are.
No. I think we can do that. That's a more realistic aim than setting up a supreme monarch. You know, I do like constitutional monarchs. I'm absolutely a monarchist because, for one thing, if the commander-in-chief of your armed forces is the king or the queen, politicians have less influence than they otherwise would. Because, like, when I joined the British Army, I swore allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen. I didn't swear allegiance to the fucking Prime Minister. You know, thank God. So I think that's an advantage. I know that there are, for example, Australian royalists who use that as one of their strong points against republicanism, and I think it's true. You know, you don't want to be swearing allegiance to a politician. That makes it much easier for politicians to get people to shoot their own people, you know. So all of that is true. Look, if an absolute monarch was a practical thing, I might maybe support it, but it ain't. You know, like I'm one of these guys who think I would like to put the voting age up to 21, and I don't even think that's going to happen. You know.
Well, I mean, I don't think people should vote, but yeah.
Me neither.
No. I think there should be a property qualification or having served in the armed forces to vote. That's what I think. But that certainly ain't going to happen. But I'm trying to look at practical things we could do. And I think practically, yeah, we could turn around and say no one votes to the 21. And that would be a good idea because people are a little bit more mature at 21 than they are 18. But instead, we're going the other way, you know?
Well, I don't know, I think we need to severely limit the franchise. I don't know.
Yeah, me too. I totally agree with that, but I don't think it's practical politics.
No, well, I don't know. People won't vote to remove their own rights, will they? Practically, I mean, we can laugh. Yeah. I mean, people can laugh about democracy or how much they hate democracy all they want, but at the end of the day,
I detest democracy. I think it's because it's not real. It's a con. There is no democracy. When you can choose between Alexander Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer, that's a con.
I'm a bit of a rationalist in the sense that I think that people would argue if we didn't live in a democracy, people would probably argue for more rights in terms of it because it would be in their interest too, right? Because it would give them more power.
How? But how do they do that if they can't vote for it?
Well, how did anyone gain? How did people gain the franchise in the first place? Right? I don't know.
Because people thought it was a good idea.
Well, that's why.
But we know now it's not.
Well, it is a bad idea. I'll give you that. Yes, but I think like if people lived in that system, it would be in their interest to argue for more franchise or to give themselves more rights, right?
Yeah, but only some people did, and like you can see this, and if you look at Britain in the early to mid 19th century. you can see people saying, "Oh, well, we need to do this," and then it just gets extended and extended. You know.
Well, yeah, that's coming from the Enlightenment, but I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah, but you know, we can't get rid of the Enlightenment. You know.
Hmm.
It's
I
like
mean, I
this
was,
was the other thing I was going to say about these idiots who talk about like riding the tiger and NRX and clear pills. If you're going to say that's true, then you've got to look at us as being somewhere towards the end of the ancient Roman Empire. And what we should be saying to each other, if they are right, is that, okay, lads, don't worry, it'll be all right in 1,000 years. Because that's how long it took for things to get back to where they were at the end of the Roman Empire, was basically 1,000 years.
Mm. I think Son of Britain's asked a question to you and me, I think. What do you think of a liberal democracy like in Hungary? Could just limit voting to males aged over 25 who paid more than they took out and serve national service and are moral. I know Sargon makes a big deal of the, what is it called? That film. I've forgotten what it's called. Does anyone know? What's it called? March. Is it called? It's not called that. That's March of the Titans is something very different, I think.
What's it about?
That thing, service guarantees citizenship. People will know.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember what the film's called.
Starship Troopers.
Starship Trooper. That's the one.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good plan. I think that's a good idea. Yeah. And yeah, to answer Son of Britain, yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. I don't think it's ever going to happen in the UK, unfortunately, but I wish it would. Males aged over 25 only voting, and the only people I'd give an exception to that to would be people who served in the armed forces, and they'd be males.
I think the most controversial thing I've said at uni is that I think that voting age should be limited to people with property. That's probably the most controversial thing I've said, which is a bit sad, really. But I mean,
well, I'd limit it to people with property or people who'd served in the armed forces.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. If you serve in the armed forces, then you deserve to get the vote.
I don't know. I think someone made an argument once that it should be one vote per household, which I think probably would be a good thing. But
agree with that. I agree with that too. Household voting, we used to have that in the UK. I think that's a good idea.
And Hungary as well, it's important to mention, does have a strong national church as well. Strong links between the church and the state. So
yeah,
that's another reason why
the Church of England is like being destroyed.
Even if Hungary had pretty universal voting, I think something like 40% of young people support Jobbik, and then like 30% support Fidesz. Like over like 80% of young people have like populist, right wing, or conservative opinions. So I mean, that's a sign of the kind of upbringing they have there. So I think any system they'd have would pretty much give the same outcomes. But
I nearly moved to Hungary for work 10 years ago, and I kind of regret it, to be honest.
Maybe you shouldn't. I don't know. I just don't. Can they stand against Globo Homo? I mean, I hope they can, but we'll see. I guess we'll see. I hope they can. I don't know, like, if they can do that if they have to stay in the EU. But then I think the EU is dying, whatever happens. The only question is how long it takes before it dies totally.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm just going to take a couple minutes. I'm just going to grab a drink. I'll be 2 minutes.
No worries. I just think with the EU, it's just a case of how long does it take for Germany to really fall out with France, at which point the EU is finished. So,
I mean, the thing is with the democracy thing is, it probably isn't going to happen. But I kind of feel if you were going to win the argument on monarchy, now is actually the time. Like, I just think that all the pieces are in place in a sort of funny way that lends itself to that.
I just don't think it's ever going to happen, mate. I mean, listen, I'm not totally against it because
well, I mean, to be fair, none of the stuff we talk about on the streams is probably ever going to happen. But
no, I think no. Well, look, let me be clear. I think Britain will stop mass forward immigration. It's just a case of if we do it soon enough. I think that's going to happen because it's logical and most people want it to happen. In the same way that Britain did Brexit because it's logical and most people wanted it to happen. I think we will stop mass forward immigration. I'm not sure we'll ever sort out the bad stuff from feminism, which is like 99.975% of feminism. Don't know if we'll ever do that.
Right, but they only let us have a referendum on Brexit was because they were confident they could win it.
Yeah. No, I agree. But on the other hand, you know, the Brexit we've got is like only really 60%, maybe. But it's better than anyone else managed. You know, you've got to look like none of these other fucking nations, excuse my language, none of those nations managed to leave the EU. At least Britain did. You know, it's an argument for British exceptionalism, I suppose.
Yeah. So Suno's Hamar, I don't know how you say your name. Said, but there are already millions here. Even if you stop now, it's not enough to stop it. Well, no, sure, but the
That's
thing
why
is
we were
that,
talking about putting white birth rates up as well.
well, yeah, but I mean, the thing is that you have to disempower the political franchises that benefit from more immigration.
Yep.
That's
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
like a large piece of the puzzle.
Well, I mean, that's basically the Labour Party, or at least they think it is.
Yeah, it's like 90% of the Labour Party and probably 60% of the Tory Party and so on and so forth.
I don't think 60% of the Tory Party benefits from immigration. To be honest with you,
They think they do though. They think they can. That's why they've invited the Hong Kongers in.
But surely one of the things that, like, Labour is, you know, if you're talking about Labour MPs being LARPing and putting Union Jacks behind themselves, one of the reasons they're doing that is they've finally realised that, you know, all those white voters in the Midlands and the North who abandoned them, it's because of their mass immigration policies, you know?
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's kind of insulting in a way that they think that they can just wave some Union flags around and win back all those votes. I mean, maybe it'll work. I don't think it will though.
No, I don't either. I don't think the British working class are anywhere near as crap and idiot as those people think they are. I really don't. And listen, I got to ask a couple of things that people said in chat earlier. While I remember, I think it was Sunil Hamar said, "Why did I slag off Morgoth?" The only thing I slag Morgoth off for is he's allergic to the Union Jack. He's British. I'm sorry. I don't understand why an English British guy is allergic to the Union Jack. I think it's a great flag. Used to fly over a third of the world, and the sun never set on it.
Apron.
Yeah, we were good, eh?
Yeah.
We were damn good at what we did. We were good at what we did, mate. I have two flags. Actually, I have 3 flags in my house. I have a Union Jack. I have the old South African flag, the one that was based on the Dutch East India Company, like when the white government was in charge. And I have an Australian flag, which also includes a Union Jack. So, you know. So I think the Union Jack's a great flag. You know, it's England, Britain, Ireland, and Scotland together. It's a damn good flag.
Well, to tie 2 conversations together, right? Because we were just talking about this a second ago. What did you think on that Ride the Tiger stream when they were saying about how nationalism is sort of to the left of the true traditionalist system, which would be just monarchy? And I to be honest, when they were saying that, I did kind of get like, I was thinking a lot about like Henry V, for example.
Yeah, I love Henry V. I love Alfred the Great and all these. Squatty Bucker's Alfred the Great. There you go. Good point. He's saying get a Wessex flag, the white English white dragon. Great flag. Nothing against that at all. Same as I like the Cross of St. George. But what I would say is on that stream, they were saying, like, if you're patriotic, you're supporting global homo. And I kind of get what they're saying in that sense. But I just think it's impossible for somebody who loves their nation as like I think most men should, to say, oh, well, I don't care about the modern nation because it's not the same as it was in 1800. But then the nation in 1800 wasn't the same as when it was in 1400. And the nation in 1400 wasn't the same as it was in 500, you know?
Yeah.
Nations do change. And I love the nation. I don't love the government and the politics. Like, if people think I like Alexander Johnson now, then obviously they must be deaf.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that there's some good things to come out of nationalism over a purely like a purely monarchic system like before, and that's probably that you've now got an institution that can span the ages rather than just the life and times of a single person. Yeah, and there's this aspect to which when you get stuck with a bad monarch, you could see it through because it was about something greater and something longer lasting.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, my love of Britain isn't about Britain today. It's about Britain over the last 1,000 years.
Mm.
And it's like my own blood. Like my son's serving in the Royal Navy. My great-great-grandfather served in the British Army. It's like you can't just toss that shit aside, man. And if you do, I don't think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And we don't have time to sit there and wait for this NRX white pill ride the tiger bollocks of the current global homo system collapsing, because we've only got until about 2065 before we're liable to be a minority in our own nation.
Mm.
And the same thing applies to countries like Ireland. The same thing applies to countries like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and even the US.
Yeah, Senator Hamar said that was a poor argument I made. Yeah, he's probably right. A monarchy is still transcendental, so.
I mean, like I say, I'm a monarchist. I just don't think it's practical to have like an all-powerful monarch anymore. I just think that's not going to happen, and I don't see how it could.
I think it will happen, but not in our lifetimes.
Well, it certainly won't happen in our lifetime. I very much doubt if it'll happen in our grandchildren's lifetime. But I mean, I suppose it could happen. But for that to happen, you'd have to have a total collapse of all power, and then everything built up from the bottom again from a tribal society. Then it might happen.
Mm.
What we're talking about?
Having an all-powerful monarch rather than like a constitutional monarch.
Well, I don't know. I think like in a natural society, in where a hierarchy forms, you would get hereditary monarchy, because that tends to be what happens, even in like Africa is the case. So sort of these sort of hereditary sort of systems sort of come about. So I think if we had a build up, but to be honest, like, I'm not a collapsitarian. I don't think we're going to collapse. So I think it's going to be a slow peter out, and we'll have liberal democracy for all time, probably. So
no, God, no, please, God, no. I was just saying to Alan while you were away that like the only way I could see us getting back to like a monarch who had all power, like a kind of Henry V type character, would be if there was a total collapse of our crappy system, which I don't think would be a bad thing in the long run, but it would be in the short to medium term. But that's the only way I could see us ever going back to like an all-powerful monarch again.
Sano Samar, I probably don't agree with a lot of things he's been saying in chat this evening, but he has made a good point in saying that if you look at the Roman Republic, they hated monarchy and they still ended up with a monarch. Then they just didn't call it as such.
Yeah,
obviously
he was the emperor. Yeah, absolutely.
They used the word. I think Caesar and Augustus they used instead. And obviously Caesar then became Tsar and Kaiser, so which means emperor. So
yeah. So it's like I don't disagree with that. I just don't see how we would get back to that system without a total collapse. I just don't.
Well, I don't see how that. It's not again. If you want to go back to Cicero, Quo Bono, who benefits from a total collapse? Nobody really. So I don't think it will happen. I think
everyone on the right would eventually benefit from a total collapse, but it would probably take quite a while.
It's very long term.
But the left would absolutely be destroyed by a collapse because their stuff is totally fake. Everything the left believes in is fake. Every single thing, like women are the same as men. Women can be soldiers the same as men. Everyone can be any sex they want. Everything they believe in is shit and crap and not true. And it just isn't true at all. And if there was a collapse back to some kind of like even a frontier type society, the left would be destroyed. They wouldn't survive at all. They wouldn't be able to survive.
Hmm.
You know, these guys, like, they need a safe space for someone saying bad words. You know, you think they're going to survive, like, when people are going around killing anyone who's weaker than them? Well, guess who's going to get killed first? All of the left. You know? These guys who say diversity is our strength, the diverse guys will be destroyed before the guys who are not diverse, because they won't hang together so strongly.
Yeah, I mean, in a state of nature, you're right.
Yeah. So if there was a collapse, the only people who are really going to benefit from that are the right and the realistic side, because the right is the realistic side, and the people who are not is the left, because they're basically all fake crap. It's all nonsense that wouldn't survive outside this ridiculous Western society that we have created, certainly since 1945, but even before that started creating. They would have no chance of survival. You know, you tell me. I mean, look, I was an infantry soldier and I was a private, and I'd probably been in about, I don't know, 30 or 40 punch-ups in my life, okay? And I'm not a very violent man. I'm really not. You got to push me a bit before I hit you. But there are many people on the left who simply would not survive one fight. Don't know how to fight someone. Would cry, run away, say, "Oh my God," you know, all this shit. They wouldn't survive 5 minutes in a natural world.
No, that's true. I think Son of Britain's made a good point here in saying that many, not that even that many on our side. I think to be honest, right wingers on the whole generally are more, I don't know, more on this kind of thing. I think I've had 2 proper fights in my life, and I've won one, lost one, so it's not a terrible record. But,
don't get me wrong, mate. I lost more fights than I won.
Well, I mean, he's made a fair point, like saying, "Oh, how many people know how to build a house from the ground up? Boilers, electronics." I mean, it would be a very, very small number of people. Right?
Yeah, but if you're building a house from the ground up in that sort of situation, it certainly wouldn't need electronics. It probably wouldn't need boilers. You see, you're arguing from a false thing. You're trying to say, "Oh, build a modern house." Building a modern house needs a team of people, unless you're a very exceptional person. But building a cabin in the woods, that's not beyond the ken of man, you know? And having an open fireplace that you can put wood into and all this kind of thing, not beyond the ken of man to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, even on this side, to be fair, I think the amount of people that would know how to do that. I mean, I was in Scouts, but I mean, I'm not sure if I'd be able to go to the woods and build a house, knock down a tree and build a house out of it. But,
well, I don't know. I remember I lived in Nimbin for a while, which was like the Australian marijuana capital, if you want. And I lived there for a while because I was with this girl, and she lived in a wriggly tin shack in the woods, which is like a corrugated iron shack. Wriggly tin is what the British Army calls corrugated iron, and she didn't even have a cover over her fireplace, so that when it rained, her fire went out. Wow, I kind of worked out that you needed to put a cover over that. it's like,
yeah,
it's like, she was a girl. Girls.
Wow.
I don't know, man. Like I would survive in the woods, can survive in the woods, have survived in the woods. It's like I think most men can.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there's, I don't know, I'm a believer that like a lot of, for example, like babies know to crawl in a straight line, right? And I think to an extent, deep within like human beings, there's some evolutionary stuff going on that we pretty much would have an idea of what to do, even if you weren't trained.
Yeah, but
like,
most of these people who can't decide what gender they are probably wouldn't. They probably wouldn't.
Well, I don't know. I'm a believer that people are to an extent pre-programmed. I'm not a believer in the state. But...
Let me ask you this. This is something I wanted to bring up because I'm going to be doing another Commonwealth stream either this week or next week. My second one. Like I do old Commonwealth streams, and when I say the old Commonwealth was Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and back in the day South Africa. that Commonwealth, the settler Commonwealth, if you like. And I'm going to be doing the second one of these either later this week or early next week. So I'm going to put this one up here. In Canada this week, a father has been jailed, sent to prison, because his daughter is being given hormone therapy to become a boy.
I saw this. Yeah.
It's like, I just don't know where this evil, vile world comes from, where a father can be jailed for trying to defend his daughter. I just, it's beyond me, mate. It really is beyond me. Adam, what do you reckon of that, mate?
Yeah, I saw this. It's a tough one. I mean,
But there is no tough, is there? He's the dad, and this is an underage child, and he should just be able to say, no, you can't do that. If she wants to do that when she's 19, that's her choice, but not now. And he certainly shouldn't be able to be sent to prison because of it.
yeah, it's a tough one on how you fix it, though.
Well, to me, it's like parents are in charge of kids on that stuff until they're 19. I mean, I'd sooner it was 21, but 19 at the moment. You know, when you're of age.
Oh,
I mean, this girl is 15 as far as I understand. That's a child.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, like, her dad's opinion should absolutely be the opinion that counts until she's at least 18. Then, fine, let her do what the fuck she wants. You know, she's an idiot in my opinion, but you know, do it. But there's no way, even if you don't allow for all that, there's no way that for saying that he should be sent to fucking prison. That's ridiculous. I mean, it's like, you know, when the British government sent people to prison, dads who were trying to save their daughters from Muslim rape gangs. And they did that too. This is evil. This is why we have to win as patriots and nationalists. It's because there is evil being done. And it's being done to children and to families.
Yeah, it was kind of ironic as well that that all the rights that they now use, the government does to do this, were brought in under the guise of protecting children. I mean, it was always that they needed to be able to take children away from bad parents, and now we're stuck with a system where you can't keep the children away from, you know, terrible influences.
Well, there was that case in America of the bloke who was trying to stop his son being turned into a girl. He also nearly went to jail. And that's in America, which we're told is this great freedom-loving place that is full of guns. Didn't seem to make much difference, did it? I don't know, guys. To me, this stuff is evil. It's child abuse.
Well, the question is, I mean, you've said once they've reached 19, but should it be illegal full stop to do those things to yourself? I think
it should be illegal until you're at least 21, in my opinion. But that's me. I think the age of consent should be 21. But the age of consent for getting married, changing your sex and all that stuff should be 21. I mean, I'll be realistic and I'd say, okay, maybe the age of consent for sex should be 18. I don't think it should be 16 these days. I used to think 16 was fine, but then I was 19 and it didn't matter. But I think probably the age of consent for sex should be 18, but the age of consent for all serious shit should be 21, really.
Yeah.
When you get to vote, should be 21, all of that stuff. You're more grown up at 21 than you are 18.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, but I mean, the age of consent for marriage shouldn't be higher than the age of consent for sex.
I don't know about that, but yeah, maybe you're probably right. You're probably right, actually. And actually, if I remember rightly, I don't know whether they changed it, but like when I was a young guy, I think 16, you had to have your parents' consent to get married at 16.
Yeah,
wasn't that right? And yeah, okay, maybe you can do it that way. Maybe you do it that way. I don't know.
I think there was a girl who got engaged at my school at 16, but I can't remember. how
Well,
that went.
at my school, I knew girls were having sex at 12, but that's different. I was in the middle. I was in the middle of South London, and it wasn't the best place. What it's like now, I dread to think. But then there won't be any white people there anymore, anyway, so it won't make any difference. But I don't know, guys. I just think the social liberal globo homo system that we have at the moment is just constantly pushing evil now. Everything from drag queen story hour to little 7-year-old boys dancing in gay strip clubs and having people put money in their underpants, which is stuff that would have made my father's generation vomit.
Makes me vomit.
Yeah, but my dad's generation would have wanted to chop those people's heads off.
Yeah.
I'm not joking. They would have. My dad would have just got so angry if he'd have seen a thing like that. And I don't know, man. We're fighting evil. We are fighting evil.
I mean, you can sometimes see older people that used to consider themselves liberal saying oh, I think maybe a man and Qatar have got some things right. So things have really gone off the edge over here, but it's dreadful. It's awful. I mean, but
it's just impossible, man. It's I don't know. I remember cases back in the 90s up in the Orkney or the Shetland Islands, where they were trying to say all these kids were being abused by satanic people, and it all turned out to be stuff about Thomas the Tank Engine, and these left-wing idiot morons had gone up there and taken all what these kids said about Thomas the Tank Engine and the Fat Controller and all this sort of shit and turned it into this great conspiracy, and they took kids away from loads and loads of people. And said, no, you're abusing your kids. And it wasn't. It was just kids talking about Thomas the Tank Engine. Because kids, come out of crap. I remember my little boy loved Thomas the Tank Engine when he was tiny. My little boy's 25 now and flies jet fires. But when he was a little boy, he loved Thomas the Tank Engine. And he wanted to be an astronaut at one stage. He wanted to be an engine driver. And, but these days, little kids of 5, 6, 7 turn around and say, oh, yeah, I want to be a girl. And they make them a girl. Kids just come out with shit, all the time. Kids come out with crap.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that who's not a moron.
Yeah.
Except the left, who are morons.
Well, I think there's a streak to which some of this is deliberate though as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, gay acceptance leads to trans acceptance leads to pedophile acceptance, and it's not surprising. There are Labour MPs who were in the supporters of NIMBLA. The boy man gay.
Whatever it is, yeah. I know you mean.
Pedophile, vile shit. Then there are Labour MPs who are still Labour MPs who supported that shit. But why are they still Labour MPs? Because, if a Conservative MP had been involved in, say, the KKK, I'm pretty sure they'd get the sack. But Labour MPs can be involved in pedophile organisations, but that's all right. Somehow, for some reason. I don't know. Is there a bit of a double standard going on here somewhere?
Maybe. Scotty Buckers. Anyway.
Yeah, just maybe. All right, guys, I've got to go to Lou. Please entertain these guys by talking about something you find interesting. Not the boring shit I go.
But 7 people are talking. Do we really have to talk about the unwashed versus Phil thing? I just don't even know what it's about. Loads of people are discussing it now. So I mean,
what's happening?
I think they're having a debate.
Yeah,
they're gonna have a debate. I don't know what about. Does anyone know what the debate's about? Want to say in the chat? Because I know Phil did a stream saying he doesn't like Unwashed, but I mean, I swear Unwashed just talks about lockdown the whole time. So I mean, I don't really watch Unwashed, to be honest. So that doesn't really. I heard the reason why kids. Yeah, I know. Why hasn't he washed? I don't know. Oh God. I think someone said, what was it? Resident DJ at Butlins. This is true calling. Oh dear. I'm sure. I mean, he's probably a perfectly fine guy. I've never really watched his streams. To be honest, I don't really watch any like dissident right wing streams too much. I watch
I think
Hemi
he's been on here a
sometimes.
few times, to be honest.
I've been on. I don't think I've ever been on Iron Duke's channel.
No.
But I sometimes watch stuff, but I don't watch it that often.
Yeah.
I watch Endeavour quite a lot. I watch Aurora McIntyre. I watch the NRXs. But...
Yeah, I watched that Aurora McIntyre. I haven't actually watched Endeavour in a while. Yeah, they're all right. I think, to be honest, the Distributors might be my favourite YouTuber.
He does good stuff, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Distributist. I think, yeah, he got threatened with loads of stuff recently, but
Distributors is very good. He's a good guy, and that stuff he was threatened with was from President Sunday.
Yeah, I try not to say his name, to be honest. And just call him Mr. Day of Rest or something.
Yeah, he's an entire insane moron. And Dave, the Distributist, is a good bloke, and all of that was nonsense. I mean, Dave's a new dad. He's got a young baby and a missus, and all of that stuff was rubbish about the Distributors. And I'm not a Roman Catholic either, but I've followed Dave for years.
Yeah, that dude who I'm not going to name. I mean, he shit at chess for a start, but he did. It's kind of funny because he railed against AA over something AA said in a video about not trusting books written after 1945. And I found that kind of weird because that guy has said exactly the same thing. About
it's a common sense opinion anyway. I mean, certainly books written after 1965 are not trustworthy. That's generally true. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, no, Dave the Distributist is definitely one of my favorite YouTubers, and I don't know. I'm not sure these days. I'm somewhere between an atheist and an agnostic, but I'm not. I've liked Dave for ages, and he's a fairly devout RC bloke. So you know.
I think you spoke earlier about the NRX. I think Distributist. I've only watched a few of his videos, but I think he is quite fond of the whole Yavin thing, isn't he?
He kind of is. I think he's also got his own positions on that stuff. What I would say about Dave is he's one of the more intelligent guys on the right. He's no sort of Nazi larper.
No.
He's got some intelligent opinions, and he's walking the walk because, like I say, he's a dad. He's married and he's a dad. And I get fed up with these guys. And they do point up to it rightly quite often, is that the number of people on the right who are gay, for example, that's a difficult position to be on the right, if you ask me.
Well, how many gays are there, really? There's Millennial Woes and Greg Johnson. I can't think of anyone else. But
I think Millennial Woes is not quite gay, but yeah. Greg Johnson, there's a number of others. There are. They get attracted to the kind of the Nazi uniforms and stuff. I think that's.
There's Barden Reese as well, but I think Barden Reese has said he's not a nationalist. So I mean,
yeah, there's a lot of people saying that lately. I've noticed.
It's pathetic. I'm sorry, it's pathetic. That's the first time I've got Ayatollah's brown. Anyway,
I don't know. I think
disavowing nationalism. Disavowing nationalism. Why are we disavowing nationalism? Because
the people who are disavowing nationalism that I've seen weren't nationalists really, anyway, and they're pursuing writing careers and so on, or at least that's what they're telling us. So I don't know. My problem with British nationalists is twofold. I don't like British nationalists who are actually German nationalists. And particularly German 1930s nationalists. I don't like those guys. I've got to say I don't. And they don't do any favours for British nationalism. And I do like British nationalists who I prefer them when they get married and have kids, I've got to say. But, you've got to find the right woman, and it takes time. So, yeah. But also, I don't think you can be you can't really be a conservative these days. Like in terms of the Conservative Party, the Conservative Party is not conservative. They don't conserve anything, really.
Mm.
You know, they haven't conserved anything since. Even Mrs. Thatcher didn't conserve anything. The last British Prime Minister to conserve anything was probably Lord Salisbury. Who, to my, he was the Conservative Prime Minister.
Yeah, I went and made myself a cup of tea, and I was thinking about the last thing I saw in the chat before I walked away, and it was someone said that you get more sort of bad leaders under our modern liberal democracy than even if you had the occasional bad king, because that was something I'd said. And it just made me think, because you could actually probably count more good leaders that had been pushed out of the way before they could assume leadership than actual good leaders in power under liberal democracy in all of Europe in the last sort of 100 years.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, that's a good point.
look. Let's look at this from just a purely conservative and inverted commas. Actually, look at it from a British point of view, if you like. From the time of Lord Salisbury, who was Prime Minister up to 1902, if I remember correctly, who do we think is good leaders since then? Just pick out the ones you think are good.
Douglas Home was alright, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, Douglas Hume wasn't terrible. Yeah, I agree with that.
I don't know. Leaders of the Conservative Party. Ooh.
No, any. It doesn't have to be conservative. Any good leader between 1902 and 2021 gives you a long time, mate.
Controversial choice, Tony Benn, perhaps. He was alright.
No, leaders. They have to actually be prime ministers.
I'll do Prime
year?
Minister.
What's the first
Yeah,
year?
prime ministers. Yeah,
What year are we starting from?
1902 to 2021. So it gives you 120 years, just about.
Chamberlain?
Maybe.
Maybe. That's a stretch.
So you're saying Hume Chamberlain so far? Come up with 3.
Impossible.
Well, I've got to hop off now. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
I just got to say, I think I'm at 798 subscribers on my YouTube channel. So
Well done. Listen, do me a favor, mate. Look in my channel stuff and send me your email so I have a link to you, please.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very interested in talk. Good night, chat, and
you're welcome. Go well.
Cheers, guys. See ya.
Yeah. All right. Let me think. Best 3. Well, obviously, I'd say Salisbury, 1902. I don't think Macmillan was terrible, but I didn't like his Winds of Change speech in Africa at all. Thatcher wasn't terrible, but she sure fucked up industry in the north and Midlands of England. Other than that, I don't know. I'm not sure on that. I really am not. Balfour could have been all right, but he never really got the chance to be. And I think he was probably a bit too weak, to be honest.
What about if I said the last actual good Prime Minister was the Duke of Wellington?
Well, you could even argue about that, to be honest, because he did extend the franchise, which on one level was good, but on other levels wasn't. If I was going to say the last good Prime Minister, I'd have to absolutely say Lord Salisbury. 1890s and early 1900s. Absolutely Lord Salisbury. That would be the last one I'd pick. I'd actually like to do a stream on Salisbury because he was cool as fuck. And Splendid Isolation comes from his era. When, the conservative thing was no alliances with anybody. Although we did actually eventually get an alliance with Japan, but only in the Pacific. And it was a very good alliance because it meant if you went to war with one nation, you didn't have to come in. You'd have to go to war with at least 2. So like Japan could fight Russia and that was nothing to do with Britain. And if Britain had fought Germany, that would have been nothing to do with Japan. It had to involve two nations before the other nation came in. So it was a good alliance in that sense, from my point of view. And it also meant the Royal Navy didn't have to keep quite so many battleships in the Far East. But other than that, it was called Splendid Isolation because it was. The Royal Navy was kept at more than twice the strength of the next two strongest navies combined. So there was never any danger of Britain being invaded. And the Royal Navy was strong enough to defend the Empire, which of course was all around the world. So yeah, I reckon Salisbury was the last good British leader and British Prime Minister.
Yeah.
In my opinion. The problem with Asquith, as Son of Britain is talking about here, is that he had Grey as his foreign secretary, who tied Britain absolutely from ankle to neck in with France and Russia. And it, the worst policy there ever was for any. Britain's never done that. Never ever did that. Never.
Yeah. Someone said William Pitt in the chat. I don't know much about him, actually.
Pitt the Younger. I presume they're talking about Pitt the Younger, the bloke who was in charge during the Revolutionary Wars, early stages in the Napoleonic Wars. Yeah, he was pretty good. I liked his dad better, though. Pitt the Elder was better.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pitt the Elder was like, we're going to go into this world war. I mean, like the 7 Years' War, what the Americans call the French and Indian Wars. The 7 Years' War was like the First World War, really, because it was all over the world. And Pitt the Elder went into this war and said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to send a small British army to Europe to like fight with our allies. And they did pretty well because they were well trained and all that shit. But mostly what we're going to do is go around the world and we're going to destroy French North America. We're going to destroy French India and just take them over for ourselves. He was just brilliant, man. He was just brilliant. He was great. Pitt the Elder, I think, brilliant. And incidentally, Pitt the Elder was very much against the American War of Independence. He thought that we shouldn't have fought it, which is possibly true. But there you go.
Right, but wasn't wait, am I getting these two the wrong way around? Wasn't one of them a Whig?
Oh yeah, they were kind of both Whigs to a degree.
Right.
Like the Whigs ran Britain right up until there was a little period in the Napoleonic Wars when they didn't, but not for very long. And really up until the 1860s,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they were absolutely the older guy was, which is why he was. And part of the reason Britain lost the American War of Independence was that half of the leading people in Britain, including the politicians and even some generals and admirals, wouldn't fight against the Americans. They wouldn't fight against them. So, I mean, apart from the fact that, of course, France was helping them, Spain was helping them, and the Netherlands were also helping them, but, Americans don't like to remember that stuff. Punko Bastardo, let me just tell you something, all right? I don't know where Brutus is. He's a grown-up guy who can do what he wants. Unwashed has me banned at the moment, which is the second time he's done it. Don't really give a shit. And Grief's not on here because Grief is not a regular guest on this show. He comes on occasionally. So there we go.
Did Unwashed ban you?
Why did Unwashed ban? I tell you exactly why he banned me. Actually, I won't. I'll tell you in private because it's I'll tell you in private. I'll tell you in private after the show. I'll tell you. But there is a reason, and it's a pathetic reason. But there you go. Adam, and you're supposed to teach me about the JQ. Apparently.
Read. How do you say his name? Is it Hilaire Belloc?
Yeah, I've read Hilaire Belloc. I've read the guy who wrote for God's sake, Cultural Critique. I've read that stuff too. Read it all. Just don't
I haven't
believe
actually
it
read
all.
that, to be honest.
Yeah, I have. I've read all three of those books. I just don't believe it all. To be
I liked
honest.
Hilaire Belloc's book on the Jews, though. To be honest.
Yeah, but Hilaire Belloc is also the guy who wrote what was it? You can say whatever you like, but we have got the Maxim gun and they have not. Something about like the British Empire being terrible to people. So I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, he's not British.
But he's also not very right wing.
No, but he does know stuff.
Yeah, sure. Loads of people know stuff, but it's whether you believe it or not. Listen, I think there is a little bit of truth in the JQ. I do. They are overrepresented in some places. They have far too much power in America, particularly the Israel lobby, and that drags Britain into stuff because Britain, gets dragged into stuff by the Yanks. But in terms of Britain, I think it's like so far down the priority list of what we should worry about. It's like a long way down. I'm more concerned about Islamic rape gangs, which I really don't. I don't think they're organised by super Jews.
I mean, the thing was, I got recommended a book by a Jewish friend who's very liberal, and the book was called The Jewish Century, and it was written by a Jew, and it's won like a Jewish book award. And it was all right actually, but it was kind of it was about how like diasporic groups in general work. He also goes into like the Indians in Africa and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he talks about how like how because they're like the outside group, how they will operate for a while to sort of solidify their position. And he says so like they'll get into like they don't get into things like agriculture, but they will get into industries that the natives aren't really very interested in, and often this ends up being like pimping and sex work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he paints it very much as a good thing. He's like, oh, look at these groups that have survived and thrived, despite their shortcomings. But then I was sitting there kind of thinking like, this is very Jewy. Like, you have to be a Jew to see this as a good thing, and if you're not, it kind of seems a bit, I don't know, more damaging.
I don't know, man. Who did more damage to Europe? Like the German Jewish officers who gave Adolf Hitler his second Iron Cross in World War One, or Adolf Hitler himself in World War Two? Who did the most damage to Europe? I think it's hard to argue that one.
Right, but he wouldn't have even been there if there hadn't been sort of, Jews there to begin with, like a Jewy metropolitan.
I'm not
Weimar
sure.
Republic.
Well, Adolf wouldn't have come to power without that.
No.
Maybe. It's interesting. But yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, look, I just think Hitler did more damage to Europe than almost every other bad bastard put together, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, he did more damage. Maybe, but he did more damage to Europe even than Stalin did, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And like, Stalin was no friend of Europe. I don't know. I just think all of it is mostly irrelevant to Britain, which is why I tend to ignore it, because I think it's irrelevant. Very largely, within 5-10% at best.
Yeah. That was something Disraeli did, wasn't it? Like, wasn't it before? Where did I get this from? Wasn't it before Disraeli? Was it Jews couldn't be politicians in the UK?
No, well, it wasn't that. No, it was done later
right.
than that. Disraeli wasn't Jewish when he became a politician. His dad had a big argument with the synagogue. I don't even know what about, but he had such a huge argument with them that he converted to Civic. So that Disraeli was not religiously Jewish when he became a member of parliament. He could not have been a member of parliament had he been Jewish. But I believe the law was changed later on.
Right.
And I'm not actually against that. I wouldn't stop Jewish people being members of parliament if they want. I've not heard anything particularly bad about British Jewish members of parliament. There was certainly some shit going on in the 30s with the focus group and Churchill, but that was more the fact that Churchill would take money from anyone who would give it to him because he lived beyond his means all the time. He used to write for very racy American magazines for the same reason. So I think people put too much on that. And I'm not a big Churchill fan. Anyone who thinks I'm a big Churchill fan doesn't listen to anything I've ever said.
Yeah.
I'm not. Son Hummer, I don't have inner boomerism. I'm not a fucking boomer, all right? I'm not old enough to be a boomer.
Well, I mean, boomer isn't about age, is it? It's a state of mind.
Yeah, right.
Even I've got a little bit of an inner boomerism.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not a boomer, guys. And I'm not struggling to overcome my inner boomerism. What my problem is I want British nationalism to win. And if it's like PA Nazi LARPA style British nationalism, it will never fucking win. So leaving everything else aside, and I do think there's a good deal of crap talked about the JQ stuff and Super Jews, that we poor non-Jewish people can't possibly fight against because they're so much more powerful than we are. It's a bit like, oh God, poor white people, we're being defeated by these enormously powerful black and brown people. I find that pathetic, mate. I do. I don't like it. I'm not a victim.
Yeah, but there is like a certain instance where you have to. There's like an image you have to portray whilst also overcoming like the reality. And the reality is we are kind of being a bit screwed over at the moment.
We are being screwed over, but we're being screwed over by mostly other rich white people.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
Mm.
We're and not only rich white people, by left-wing white people. And women, we're being screwed over by those guys for sure.
Yeah, but I don't think that's where it starts. I think they're willing participants for a multitude of reasons, but
maybe, man, I don't know. I don't know. I used to occasionally walk home from a nightclub in London when I was like 18, 19. I would occasionally walk home from a nightclub in the middle of London through Brixton in the middle of the night. And I'm 6'2" and 200 pounds. And I never got any problems,
Mm.
So I was never worried by that shit. Do I think a whole area of London should be taken over by one group of people? No, I don't. But there we go. But I ain't a natural victim,
Yeah.
I almost got like what looks like a second joint on the index finger of my left hand, where a black guy tried to kill me with a machete, and I grabbed it, and it went right through the bone. It was quite interesting. It was his bone afterwards, but he didn't survive. So I don't give a shit about that stuff. I'm not a victim, and I don't think most British guys were ever victims. And I think we've got to get over this idea that we are victims, and instead start saying, look, we're the majority in the country, and we should, what we say should go, really.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's not. I mean, our people kind of have got. It's not quite a victim mindset, but
They're being cut.
Yeah.
They're being cut.
I don't really know how to express it in a way that sort of captures all the nuance involved. But yeah, it's basically that.
I mean, it's like, honestly, British Empire was the best thing there ever was for most of the world.
Mm.
And people think they're ashamed of it or something, somehow. Someone says to me, oh, British Empire was terrible. I just fucking laugh.
Yeah, I mean, I'll often say to people if they talk about the empire was bad, obviously it was, and I say, well, name me some examples, and there are a few sort of rough examples, but it's kind of funny because the only ones they will bring up will be Bengal famine,
That
Churchill
was
saying,
the Bengal famine was the middle of World War II,
yeah,
when
yeah,
Britain was very short of warships because they were being sunk by the Germans and the Italians and the Japanese,
yeah,
and we couldn't move enough food to Bengal.
no,
Wasn't
yeah,
done on purpose.
yeah, I know, and that's the thing. Or they'll bring up the Churchill talked about dropping poison gas on the Iraqis, even though all gas back then was called poison. And the
Hmm.
gas he was talking about dropping would be
Tear
considered
gas.
like non-lethal by today's
Yeah, it was
standards.
tear gas. It was tear
Yeah,
gas.
and what's the other example they'll bring up? There's a few anyway, but all the examples they bring up. Oh, they'll bring up like the Opium Wars is another funny one. We talked about this, I think, before
Yeah.
on
Oh
another
my
stream.
God. Yeah. The
But
Chinese had this incredible, insatiable appetite for opium, but apparently Britain was the one who was feeding it. You know.
yeah, yeah. Even though like if you actually look at the historical data as well, just on that alone, like there was less opium consumed in China after the Opium Wars, which we won, than there was
Hmm.
before. So we seemingly fought a whole war to sell opium to them, and then forgot what we were trying to sell them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
as well, like in the actual Treaty of Nanking, there's no mention of opium, like anywhere.
No. No. I mean, I think I remember talking to you that like one of these wars was called the Arrow War because the Chinese decided to board a British merchant ship and
Yeah.
then hold it prisoner. That
Mm.
was what the war was over. It had nothing to do with fucking opium. The Arrow wasn't carrying opium.
Yeah. And so the thing is, like, if you were a clever guy, you could probably think of a few instances in the British Empire history which you could go, oh, look at this terrible instance, look at that terrible instance, but they can't even do that. They've just
It's
got
like
a few.
the guys will turn around and say the British invented concentration camps. Yeah,
Mm,
in South Africa, not true. Concentration camps were invented by the Spanish in Cuba before South Africa. And
yeah,
the British so-called concentration camps in South Africa were actually camps that were there so that the women and children who were taken off the farms could be defended against the African natives. And the women and children were given the same rations that the British Army were given, exactly the same. And because these Boer people from the farms weren't used to have a load of people together. They were all living the Boer ideal was that you could maybe just about see your neighbours smoke on a clear day.
mm,
They were used to living very, very isolated. So when you had like hundreds and hundreds of people put together, they weren't very good in terms of the latrines and all that sort of stuff. And loads of these people started dying from disease. Now, it wasn't done on purpose. Like I said, the Boer families were given exactly the same rations as the British soldiers. And it caused the biggest stink in Britain you have ever seen in your life. A women's commission was sent out to South Africa to sort it out.
yeah,
And all these women went around saying, oh, this British Army officer was stupid, and this British Army officer didn't know fuck all about women and children, and this British Army officer knew nothing about infants. Well, surprise, surprise, they were British Army officers. And it was sorted out very quickly. And
yeah,
by the end of the Anglo-Boer War, the Boers who were still on commando, the guys who were still fighting, were trying to get their women and children into British camps because they would be safe there.
yeah. I think I actually saw a stat once that the casualty rates outside the camps was higher than in the camps.
Oh, listen, there was propaganda in the nationalist era in South Africa. There was propaganda like along the lines of the British absolutely, genuinely, supposedly fed women and children broken glass to kill them. I'm not joking. That was a true thing. The idea that some 19th century British officer would do such a thing to women and children is completely ridiculous,
Mm,
I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't find one somewhere who might have, but like the idea that the general run of those gentlemen would do such a thing is entirely ridiculous. But that was the propaganda. And some people, I got in 2 fights in South Africa purely about that shit.
mm,
In the 1980s, I got in 2 fights about that. Because this guy said this, and I said, no, you're talking bullshit, mate. And there you go. So, but yeah, don't believe all this fucking bollocks that you're told.
Oh no,
You
never.
know?
But I mean, I specifically ask them just because I know they're going to peddle some rubbish, and then I can have an easy dunk and kind of laugh at them. But
You know,
that is the problem. You can't.
First Nations in Canada. I'll give you another example. First Nations in Canada, what are called the American Indians back in the day. After Sitting Bull and the Sioux had destroyed Custer and his guys at Little Bighorn in 1876, they fled to Canada. Yeah, because they knew the Americans were just going to murder them after they destroyed this Custer's force. And so the Canadians sent this officer and like a 24 Mounties, the Canadian Mounted Police, Northwest Mounted Police in those days. And they rode up there in their red coats and all this shit. And this bloke said to Sitting Bull, "Will you keep the Queen's peace, Queen Victoria's peace?" And Sitting Bull said, "Yes, we will." He said, "Cool." And these guys actually became mates. Sitting Bull and this Canadian Mounties bloke, and they did no trouble there whatsoever. British Empire was a terrible place, so terrible that the American Indians fled to the British Empire to escape the American cavalry.
Yeah.
You look at the British wars in West Africa and in Central Africa and in East Africa and Northeast Africa. They were all designed mostly to stop slavery and in some cases cannibalism. And they did stop slavery and cannibalism at the time. When the Mahdi and the Dervish Ansar took over the Sudan in the 1880s and killed General Gordon and all this stuff, the slavery, which had been huge there until Gordon had put it down in the 1870s, completely became enormous again. And it was only stopped when Kitchener and the British Army recaptured the damn place in the 1890s.
Yeah.
It was like most of the stuff they did was good. The vast majority of the stuff they did was good. Even the Maoris, when they were fighting the British in New Zealand, actually quite admired the British troops because they thought they were brave. Because the Maoris were also brave.
Yeah, right. I am going to need to go, I think.
Yeah, mate, I think we've probably done enough for this evening. But, yeah, the idea that the British Empire was bad, absolute crap, mate.
Yeah,
anyway,
we need to find a way to, propagate that. But,
Yeah, well, I hope this channel tries to do that. Anything you want to shell out, man, before you go?
No.
All right, hang around like 5 minutes, mate, because I want to tell you something in private chat before we knock off, because I'm just going to play a tune, but it's only a couple of minutes.
All right, no worries.
All right, guys, thanks for joining us. I'm just going to play us a little tune to play us out.
I am a soldier, I shall say the brambles for promotion. I've laid the French and Spaniards low some miles across the ocean. But now, me jolly boys, I bid you all adieu. No more to the wars will I go with you. But I'll ramble the country through and through, and I'll be a rambling soldier. The king, he has commanded me to range this country over, from Woolwich up to Liverpool, from Plymouth back to Dover. Courting all the girls, both old and young, with me ramrod in me hand and me flattery tongue, to court them all but marry none. And I'll be a rambling soldier. And when these wars are at an end, I'm not afraid to mention the king will give me my discharge, a guinea and a pension. No doubt some lasses will me blame, but none of them will know my name. And if you want to know the same, it's the Rambling Soldier.
All right, ladies and gents, that was the Rambling Soldier. I am either later this week or early next week going to be doing the second of my Old Commonwealth streams, where I'll be talking to some mates from Australia, Canada, and hopefully New Zealand, or maybe even South Africa. So good night, folks, and have fun.